Right, good morning everybody and welcome to the meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee on the 29th of July. I'm Councillor Ernie Clark, Chairman of the meeting, Chairman of the committee, and I'll be presiding over the meeting today. Apologies if I cough and splutter a little bit, just getting over a cold. Please can I ask that all devices are turned to silent for the duration of the meeting. If there is a fire alarm, please exit the building via the nearest exit and congregate on the grass in front of the building. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast live to the Wiltshire Council YouTube site. All documents pertaining to the meeting can be accessed on the Wiltshire Council website. This may be a lengthy meeting. If it proves to be so, I will propose that we have a break following the first item. And could I remind anybody that's here for the second item, you don't have to stay in the chamber if you don't wish to. You're quite welcome to go down and have a coffee or anything while that's being discussed. When members of the public leave the meeting, please can I request that you leave your visitor badges either in the council chamber, on the table as you exit the room, or with reception. Can I confirm that this meeting is being streamed, please? Okay, I will now formally open the meeting. Item 1, apologies. Apologies have been received from Councillor Sam Blackwell, who has been substituted by Councillor Andrew Griffin. We're also aware that Councillor Greenman has been caught in traffic in Bradford and Avon and will be here as soon as possible, hopefully before the first item is debated. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes of the meeting held on 1st of July can be seen in Agenda Supplement 1. Do any members have any comments to make on the minutes? Okay, I will ask that we approve and sign the minutes as a true and correct record and ask for a seconder. So I'll propose. Thank you, Councillor Parman. Are there any objections to confirming the minutes? Okay, there being none, the minutes are approved and I will sign them at the end of the meeting. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of disclosable interests or dispensations granted by the Standards Committee? Okay, item 4, Chairman's announcements. For transparency's sake, I wanted to announce that there was a member pre-briefing for the committee regarding application 1504736, land south-east of Trowbridge. That's Ashton Park one. The reason for this was purely because following the local authority elections on the 1st of May, there are new members of the committee, some of whom are new to the council entirely. This was a factual briefing where officers explained the long history of the application. The merits of the application were not discussed or debated. Please note that there is an additional meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee on the 5th of August 2025 and that the date of the Strategic Planning Committee scheduled for the 26th of August has been moved to the 2nd of September. Public participation. I will now summarise how the items to be determined will be debated and how public participation will proceed. Firstly, the Planning Officer will present their report and explain their recommendation. They may invite comments from other officers if appropriate. I will then ask members of the committee to indicate if they have any technical questions they wish to ask of the officers. We will then proceed to public participation. Up to 3 objectors and 3 supporters were able to register to speak for each item for up to 3 minutes each. Following the public slots for objectors and supporters, there are slots for statutory consultees. We will then hear from the formal representatives from relevant parish councils for up to 4 minutes. After the parish councils, I will then invite the local unitary member or members for the application to speak. I will then open the item to debate. I will ask the first committee member to speak to move a motion which must be seconded. Officer advice may need to be taken in relation to any motion. At the conclusion of the debate, I will then proceed to a vote. This process will be repeated for each application. So I hope everybody's clear on that. Good. Right, item 6, planning appeals and updates. There have been no appeals received or determined since the last meeting of the committee held on 1st of July 2025. So we move swiftly on to item 7, planning applications. And the first one is to consider and determine 15-04736 outline, land south-east of Trowbridge, Ashton Park. And Russell Brown, Senior Planning Officer, will present the report and recommendation, including the updated recommendations in agenda item supplement 3. So, Howard.
Thank you, Chair. So this application's back before the committee. It's been a couple of years since it was here last. And in that time, everyone involved has worked extremely hard to get it to a point where I'm now happy to report that it is a complete application. The negotiations are done. The legal agreements are ready to be signed. And we've got commitment from the applicants that the legal agreements will be moved swiftly forward so that everyone can get building. So here is, how do I do this? That one. So here's the site. That's the site area. It's a very large site. And that's the aerial view there on the right. So this is an outline application with detailed access. Everything else would be up to reserved matters, subsequent applications. So it's an application for 2,500 dwellings, 13.6 hectares of employment land, 2 primary schools, a secondary school site, ecological visitor facility, public open space and landscaping, and all the associated highway works, including the Yarnbrook West Ashton Relief Road and all the infrastructure surrounding that. This is the indicative master plan. Not sure how easy that is to interpret, so I'll just go through it quickly. The brown areas here, you can see threaded roads. That's the residential land. So there's some up here, some there, and then the bulk of it here. The employment land is this purple area here. 2 yellow areas are the primary schools. This orange area is the secondary school. And I'll go into a bit more detail later. And then there is the landscaping and the ecological mitigation that you see there in the various green colours. So since you saw it last, it needed to have an updated environmental statement to make sure that it was compliant with the EIA regs. This was submitted in January 2024, and all of the evidence bases for each sort of topic area were updated, and the results were that the scheme remains unchanged, and the mitigation, the sort of level of mitigation was very similar to what was proposed previously. What has happened in the interim, though, is, of course, things do change, and so we had different levels of obligation requirements from our various consultees, council consultees and external statutory consultees. And so whilst the scheme itself hasn't changed, there's been a lot of work to do in making sure that those contributions are correct and evidence-based and are legally sound. So that's all been worked into the 106 legal agreements, which, again, I'll come on to. This is a breakdown of the obligations which we've now got coming forward. So the on-site affordable housing remains at 26%, but I'll come back to that figure. So we've got then updated education requirements, updated bus infrastructure requirements. There's the ecology monitoring fees and maintenance contributions, but the bulk of the ecological mitigation is being done directly with the Wiltshire Wildlife Trust. We've got 3.4 million coming forward for healthcare. Due to the fact that the on-site affordable housing is less than the 30% policy requires, we've negotiated 5.4 million for off-site affordable housing to help redress that balance and that sort of deficit. 150,000 for public art, and then we've got the waste and recycling contributions. So overall, in the 106, that's going to give a package of mitigation to the tune of about 25 million. There's also approximately 7 million pounds that would be generated through the SIL. And in addition to that, the Yarnbrook West Ashton Relief Road is an infrastructure investment of around about 35 million. So it's a big package of mitigation. Obviously, it's a very large scheme, so that's what we would expect. This is the phasing plan. So just to give you an indication of how the scheme would come forward. So in phase one, we've got housing in this location and this location. And then this sort of swathe of the blue hatch here, that's the River Biss corridor. So all that would be landscaped informal open space. So that would come forward, during that early phase of the development. Phase two then picks up more housing, secondary school site and sports pitches. Phase three is in the green area there. Again, more housing. And then phase four would finish off the housing and then create the allotments, which is down in this sort of southern corner. So zoomed in a bit on the sort of central portion of the site, so I can talk about the education sites and the local centres. So I'll start with the local centres. The large blue area here, that's the primary local centre, and then there is a smaller local centre down here next to one of the primary schools. So that's one of two. The other one is up here. And the secondary school site is this orange block here. And this sort of, I don't know what colour that is, but that's the sports pitch locations. So with the secondary school site, because we've had a few inquiries about what's happening with that. So the application delivers a fully serviced secondary school site. So when I say serviced, it means it would have access, power, water, gas, broadband. It would be able to be brought forward as a secondary school site. The developers would need to offer that to us by the 400th occupation on site, and then it would be over to the council whether we take up that offer. And but that would be a decision for the school places team rather than planning team. So this application does deliver that secondary school site fully serviced. We've also made sure that that site is, as you can see, it is in the middle of the site. So we don't want it to become, fenced off and hoarded or anything like that. We've got in the landscaping scheme the ability to control the borders and things like that. So while these decisions are being made, it will remain an integral part of the site. Zoomed out a little bit just to show you some of the enhancements that have happened on site. As I say, the scheme hasn't changed, but we have been able to ensure that these routes here, you've got this purple route here, and then the blue one taking it on down. This is enhanced pedestrian and cycle routes through the development. Talk a bit about the relief road now. So just to orient you, this is the site where the development would be. This is the West Ashton crossroads, and down here is Yarnbrook, just off the bottom of the screen. And so this relief road would divert the A350 onto this new route, avoiding West Ashton with a series of roundabouts, just to pull the traffic flow away from those settlements, so we're not burdening those settlements with the extra traffic generated. This is a detail of the Yarnbrook roundabout. So again, the Yarnbrook crossroads are off the bottom of the screen to the right. So this would pick up the road just to the east of the railway, and that would then become the A350 route. And again, this is the roundabout. So that is the West Ashton crossroads at the moment. So all that traffic would be pulled out to here and away from West Ashton. This is a plan showing the ecological mitigation, which I'm not going to go through in detail. As you can see, there's an awful lot going on. This has been thoroughly worked through with our ecology team and Natural England, and the appropriate assessment has been granted to satisfy the HRA. So we're in a really good place, and the Wildlife Trust have signed up to it. So we've got the main 106, which is between ourselves and the developers. We've got a separate 106 between ourselves and the Wildlife Trust. And then the developers have also got their own legal agreement with the Wildlife Trust. So it's really been sort of thoroughly vetted through that this is all going to be able to be brought forward. Just a few photographs now. This is from the Leapgate roundabout, looking back towards what will be phase one, looking back towards Trowbridge. This, again, from the same roundabout, I've just turned around, and this is the secondary school site. Same position, but I've turned it again, and this would be the site of the larger local centre. And then this is taken from further up Leapgate, looking out across the other parcel of phase one residential development. Another look at the indicative master plan, just so I don't have to keep switching back to the front. So we can leave that there. If we have any questions, we can refer back to that. And the recommendation is that the committee continues to authorise the head of development management to grant planning permission, subject to the relevant legal agreements being entered into, as I say, which they are ready to go. We had a small update to that resolution, including a slight change of wording to condition 25, which relates to external lighting. And we've changed the wording because of the very recently adopted Trowbridge and Westbury bat mitigation strategy. The condition previously related to the 2020 bat mitigation strategy, which is now out of date. So we're also asking that delegated authority is being made to just fine-tune that condition, so we make sure we are covering the correct document. As I say, that was very recently adopted, so we didn't have time to work that in beforehand. So there we go.
Thank you, Russell. Very concise. Do members have any technical questions? I'm sure there will be quite a few, because I've certainly got a couple. Start off with Councillor Parman.
Right. First one, on the traffic that this will generate. My understanding, obviously there's a lot of money being spent on the A350 and moving that down the hill. What other mitigation, or my understanding from reading the report is that there's no improvements going on in the general highways infrastructure within Trowbridge itself, which will, as it says in the report, see an increase in traffic. Can you confirm that?
Sorry, yeah, there's no bespoke traffic works going on outside of the site. The site does deliver a bus strategy. So at the 51st occupation, there would be an hourly bus between 7 and 7. And then at the 401st occupation, those buses would become half hourly. So there has been a lot of work going into trying to make this as sustainable as possible.
Yeah, no, thank you. It brings me on to my second concern, really. I love the idea of a secondary school being there, and we have 2 secondary schools at the moment right on the other side of town. And at 3 o'clock, traffic comes to a halt around the town as parents drive across town to drop off or pick up their children. Ideally, one of those schools, and there is a question in here, that one of the schools should be, in my opinion, relocated to this new area. Now, I realise that's not planning's area, but what is being done to encourage one of those multi-academy trusts to look at relocating and selling off their existing land or our existing land for housing to be able to alleviate that?
Chair, if I might answer that and then bring a colleague in from the School Places team. So I think it's important for the committee to understand that in terms of the provision of education places. It's very much a two-stage process when we're looking at a development like this. So the role of the local planning authority, which is the committee's role, is very much to look at the development, understand the impacts of the development, in this case on school places, and secure adequate mitigation. So through the Section 106 agreement that's proposed, our advice to you is that that job is done in terms of sites are provided. There are also suitable contributions. The secondary school is largely the provision of the site. So the development is doing what it needs to in order to deal with its own impacts, because it can't look beyond that. It has to deal with only its impacts and can't look any wider than that. However, there is a wider role for the council to kind of take that into account, and maybe we could bring Clara Davis in to talk about what that other stage would be, but that would be beyond the decision making of the local planning authority.
Okay. Morning, everyone. My name's Clara Davis. I'm Head of School Place Commissioning. So the way that Section 106 works for education is that we can only request contributions for the additional places that we need to meet the requirements of the development. What we have at the moment across Wiltshire is a significantly declining birth rate. So our primary schools in Trowbridge are already suffering, if you like. They're seeing lower intakes than they have ever. And those numbers will obviously feed through into secondary. And as you'll be aware, education is far more segregated than it used to be. We have local authority maintained schools that we manage and are funded for, and academies that we don't. We have no decision-making ability when it comes to an academy. So there's no way to secure funding from a developer to move existing places. We can only request funding for additional places, and we can't ask for funding where we already have surplus places. So our secondary schools already have around 400 surplus available places. And the most important thing we need to do for our existing schools is enable them to remain financially viable. So this additional housing will do exactly that for the local primary schools and secondary schools. To our secondary schools in Trowbridge, we have 3. And I do recognise where they are is not ideal in the town, and that they do cause traffic implications. But the number of houses coming forward here is nowhere near, will not create enough additional pupils to require a whole new school. You'd need something in the region of 6,000 to 7,000 houses to have enough pupils to make an additional school viable. As far as moving an existing school, there is no, our secondary schools in Trowbridge, Clarendon and John o' Gaunt, they are large schools. So they have capacity for around 260 pupils per year group, plus the sixth form. To rebuild a school of that size would be in the region of 40 to 50 million. Now, there is nowhere for an academy to go to access funding like that. That just doesn't exist. If the schools were completely falling down and needed to be maintained, then they have to bid to the Department for Education for that funding, but that doesn't exist where the schools, it's a pot of money for condition, if you like, rather than re-providing because it needs to be built somewhere else. So at the moment, I can't see that there would be funding or a will from those schools to move. They are much bigger schools and they are on much bigger sites than this one here that would only ever able to be up to 180 places per year group. So at the moment, there are 400 surplus places in our existing secondary schools, and those schools are ready and waiting and would be very much grateful for the additional pupils from these sites in order to maintain their financial viability.
Thank you. So it sounds as though, yet again, the east of Trowbridge and the villages to the east of Trowbridge are going to end up with no secondary school. That's really great. I'm sure everybody's going to be really happy about that. Stuart, have you got any other questions?
Yeah, and it's just frustrating. I don't know if we can come out with, in the transport plan, school buses that would collect from here, or anything that can mitigate the traffic going across town at the busy times. But I think the residents of Trowbridge will they'll be seeing increased traffic from this, and no mitigation is my concern. I'll finish with one more. The employment land. We've had employment land in different parts of Trowbridge allocated in the past, and it just simply not being used. Now, reading through here, I see that at after so many houses have been built, there is a marketing plan for this employment land to try to get people to use it, and I think. I just want to know what that would entail, because we've failed in the past. We can call something employment land, but it's just a field for a very long time. What's entailed in that marketing plan, do you think?
So the employment land needs to be marketed, at fair value and widely, in order to try and get as much interest as possible. But again, this planning application can't really do more than that. We can't force businesses to come and move here. So the marketing is in the agreement, so it has to be done. That's as far as we can go. Yeah.
Okay.
Chair, if I can add as well. Within the wider planning directorate, we're in the same directorate as our economic development colleagues, and economic development colleagues are always dealing with inquiries for new development and sort of growth, really. So this will absolutely be on their radar, and subject to there being a positive resolution here, this will form part of their their own promotional work going forward.
Right, and then I'll do one last one, and then I'll let other people have a bite of the cherry. The affordable housing, we're getting a sum of money because it doesn't meet the 30% requirement. Will that be spent within Trowbridge?
I missed the start of the question, sorry, about the off-site affordable housing contribution.
Yeah, it's coming to Wiltshire Council. Is that for use across the whole of Wiltshire, or could it? I'm thinking that there are sites in Trowbridge that would benefit from that.
Yeah, it's a good question. Something we've been exercising our minds to. So as you would expect, a situation like this, we're very keen to ensure maximum flexibility in terms of how that money is spent. And one of the reasons for that is we want to make sure we get as much out of that money as we possibly can. And as many affordable units we can possibly deliver in the right locations. So the draft Section 106 agreement gives us that flexibility. I'm very pleased the developers have given us that flexibility, and I would absolutely envisage it to be spent in the local area. However, there is a process to go through to make sure that we don't, well, as I said before, get the maximum for the money that we're using and make sure it meets the needs of our communities. So that's a process that would follow this if members are minded to agree to the recommendation. It's something we'll go away and work with the cabinet member and make sure that we get the appropriate evidence to support how we can use that money in the best way possible. So it's something we've talked about, something we're thinking very carefully about. I can't 100% guarantee every penny will be spent in Trowbridge, but I can assure you that a settlement, an area the size of Trowbridge, I envisage most of the money will be.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. That was one of the things been concerning many members as well. So we're glad to hear that you're all trying to ensure it's spent in this area. Can I just go back to the school matter? If it should happen that no school becomes, or no school ends up on the site, is there anything this committee can do to make sure there's some sort of bus service to bus pupils across town rather than adding to the congestion that we already have?
I'm just going to ask Rob Rossiter, who's a highway expert, just behind me, just to perhaps come in and answer that question, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, the developments come forward on the premise that a secondary school and primary schools will be delivered. So it's always very problematic to deal with a development which is not delivered in the context of which has been submitted. In this instance, however, the site is so sizable that we do have enhanced footway, cycleway provision leading down West Ashton Road as part of the development. We have enhanced linkages to Leapgate. We have £1.1 million worth of bus service provision. In addition to that, we will have a travel plan. And of course, that will be subject to a series of targets. And if those targets are not met, then the developers will have to reach to provide solutions to achieve those targets. Now, that may include any number of measures. That could include bus passes for local school children to actually access the services which are being provided by the developers. So it's not really that much of a concern. I'd also like to pick up on one of your previous questions where you did raise the traffic impacts in the town centre. The delivery of the Yarnbrook West Ashton Relief Road provides significantly higher capacity highway infrastructure than is there at the moment. So there is a greater likelihood that that will actually suck in traffic from routes which are rat running elsewhere. So there is likely to be an improvement to the town centre just simply by providing more bigger roads on the outskirts of the town. It's the build it and they will come principle.
Okay, thank you. So we're not really quite sure about that. Councillor Newbury, you have a question.
Chairman, yeah, I've got quite a lot of questions, actually. Hard to know where to begin. First of all, we had a table on the screen with a sort of figures, and at the bottom was the amount of just over 25 million. And the officer said that we have to add on to that something over 7 million in CIL, and also some costs towards the Yarnbrook and West Ashton Relief Road, and he mentioned a figure of 35 million. I can't see in the report or the recommended Section 106 agreement any indication of how much the developers are going to be putting towards that 35 million, or Wiltshire Council or anyone else. So my first question is, could we hear a little bit more about how the 35 million breaks down and how much we need to add onto the bill for the developer?
If I may answer that, Chair. So the Yarnbrook West Ashton Relief Road is an infrastructure delivery project for the development in its own right. So there will not be any taxpayers' money paid upon this infrastructure. The road was subject originally for local growth fund and for HIF funding. Both of those pots of money went by the wayside because we didn't meet the timescales to deliver those. So now it's solely a deliverable infrastructure requirement of the development. Its timeline for delivery is set at 5 years after the first occupation or prior to the 1,000th occupation. So it's planned in the phasing of the development.
Okay, that answers my question. And then my next question about that is, the report talks about a redundant length of the A350, and we see the scheme for improving the West Ashton crossroads. We don't see much detail about the Yarnbrook roundabout, which is where the existing congestion and sort of massive tailbacks are. Could we just be this may be of interest to everybody, I think, a little bit more about the detail of this Yarnbrook and West Ashton Relief Road, why we are wanting to move traffic away from that road. It seems as if we're going to turn it into a cul-de-sac maybe between the West Ashton crossroads and the Yarnbrook roundabout. And what are the implications for the Yarnbrook roundabout? Clearly, that's incredibly congested at the moment. I take it this scheme increases the traffic at the Yarnbrook roundabout. What is the thinking about that?
This is where we have different names for roundabouts. Would that be Long Arms roundabout?
The one where the pub is, yes.
Yeah. So sadly, the scoping for the transport assessment was committed to in 2015. We had subsequent work carried out which was submitted to us in January last year, that did not include direct modelling of that roundabout. However, when we've analysed the strategic modelling, which is carried out as part of the wider scheme and indeed as part of our local plan, there is a significant reduction in traffic arriving at that junction because they're redirected to other routes connected into the Yarnbrook West Ashton Relief Road. So whilst we don't have a detailed capacity analysis of that roundabout per se, we're confident as a highway authority with the significant reduction in traffic on two arms, that the other arms will flow a lot better. Now,
So the other route, presumably, is the route from the entrance to the White Horse Business Park up to the West Wilts Trading Estate. It's that route into Westbury instead of the A350, is it?
That is a potential. But
You say the traffic is moving away from the Yarnbrook roundabout. It must be moving to somewhere. And if it's going on the A350, there's nowhere else for it to go, is there?
I might have to take that question away for 5 minutes so I can get my head around the geography, if that's okay. Could I possibly come back to you, Chair?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand the traffic changes that are being planned. And I'm sure the people of Yarnbrook would be glad to hear that they were going to lose some traffic, but the people of Westbury Station Road and the Ham Westbury would not be jumping for joy if, say, the traffic there was going to double. It'd be very interesting, I'm sure, to the wider public to hear about what these plans are. So let me move on to some other questions. The amounts for school sites and funding include roughly 9 hectares, that's about 22 acres of school sites, 3 school sites, 2 primary sites and 1 secondary school site, without, we gather, any certainty about the provision of these new schools for the reasons that Claire told us about. I mean, this 9 hectares of development land is a gigantic cost for the developer, isn't it? Could we be shown on a plan where these 3 school sites are and whether we will definitely extract them from the developer, whether the new schools go ahead or not?
So yeah, here's again the central portion of the site. So the 2 yellow areas are the primary schools. The orange is the secondary school. And as I understand it, the primary schools will be delivered, but I'll perhaps defer back to Clara.
Yes, so there are 2 primary school sites. Both will include 30 early years places, with the remainder of the early years places being delivered elsewhere in the development, because there's land for the early years sites as well that hasn't been mentioned. But the primary school sites will deliver not just the places required for this development, but from other developments in Trowbridge that have been approved as well, such as Elm Grove and Elizabeth Way. So the financial contributions we've received from those other sites will be pooled towards the new schools here. So what we will do in the first instance is obviously fill the places within the closest schools. We will then look to bring forward the first of the new primary schools, and we've staggered the funding coming in from this development, because when the money comes in, you get 10 years in which to spend it, and obviously that's also been true for the sites where we already have had approval, like Elm Grove, Elizabeth Way. So what we needed to do was ensure that we could use those contributions and not lose them, because after 10 years, if we haven't spent them, they'd return to the developer. So we've timed it in a way so that we can pool the part of the contribution from this development along with contributions from others to develop the first primary school, and then we'll do that later for the second primary school, so they come forward as and when they are needed.
Okay, but the bullet point in the recommended section 106 includes provision of 2 new primary school sites and 1 new secondary site. So do we understand that that is land to be provided by this developer from this development, or is it land that the developer will be willing to sell for the benefit? So this developer is having to provide that 9 hectares out of this development, and then other developments will get the benefit of it. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So let me go on to a couple of other bullet points in the section 106. We've got early years contribution of almost 4 million. Now, with schools, we understand about that. It's a public sector service, primary schools and secondary schools. Somebody is led by Wiltshire Council to provide school places. Early years is different, isn't it? Early years is a private sector activity. People are managing childcare in premises that they own using their staff, and in most cases charging surprisingly high fees for people to be small children to be looked after. Could we hear a little bit more about this figure of 3.9 million, which is actually considerably more than the amount being sought for primary school provision? Where does that 3.92 million go, and why is it required from this development when in most cases we don't extract Section 106 agreements to early years, do we?
So since about 2018, we always ask for early years places if we can evidence a need. Now the difference, as you've said, for early years is in how the provisions are run. You do sometimes have schools that have an age range that includes early years places. Elsewhere, they are provided, as you said, by private providers. So I don't actually, I'm not involved in the early years part of the council, but obviously I've been involved in lots of conversations over the last few years about this site. So when this was first negotiated, the 106 included either the provision of the land to be marketed for early years providers to buy and build their own provision, or contributions to the council. So either way, we would have struggled because we'd have had land but no money to build on it, or money but no land to build on. So that has now been renegotiated in this latest Section 106. That will actually be both. It's land and contribution. So where we are with early years is the regulations have all changed. Families are now entitled to far more funded provision than they ever have been previously. And we do not have the level of surplus places in our early years sector as we do primary and secondary at the moment, hence why the contribution is higher, because those surplus places aren't sitting there available. So my understanding is that the council would, and this is just my understanding at the moment, that the council would build the provisions and they would be tendered for private providers to operate. So if that private provider was to cease to run, the council can then re-tender the option to alternative early years providers, so that there's always a consistent service. I think maybe you'll be aware that it is a challenging sector, early years at the moment, in terms of recruitment and funding. So I think that gives us some certainty that with a council-owned provision that we can ensure continuity of a service. Does that answer your question?
That's very
Councillor
helpful and
Newbury?
very enlightening, because I hadn't for a moment understood that we were planning to own and operate buildings for providing early years services and then renting them to the private sector. Is that it?
Yeah, and we've got a lot of early years
So
providers.
we would have some income from these buildings, and what would we do with that?
They pay rent, yes.
Okay, let me move on then. We have the more bullet points about ecological mitigation. We have a provision of a funding for a full-time wildlife warden and mechanism for her perpetual funding. That's what used to be, I think, the full-time bat conservation officer in perpetuity, isn't it? Or is that something different?
This would be, the warden would be employed by the Wiltshire Wildlife Trust. And so this development directly funds that mitigation, which, again, we've got the legal agreements with the Wildlife Trust that they would take on the implementation of that mitigation.
So the bullet point about the full-time wildlife warden in perpetuity ties in with the bullet points about the bat agreements. It's all the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay. And do we have a cost for that, a figure? What is the amount that the developer needs to provide for all of that?
I believe it's something like 69,000 per year for the warden.
In perpetuity? So do they do that by a lump sum or by rolling the money every year? Because if it's rolling the money every year, the developer isn't going to be there forever, is it?
can't remember the mechanism for that, actually.
I mean, the last time we saw, or the time before, there was going to be a sort of a sinking fund that they had to put, a figure was mentioned. I think it was a 6-figure sum. Is there any provision for the developer to provide a large pool of money to provide this in perpetuity, or has that been dropped?
Well, the package of mitigation has been thoroughly worked through with the developers, ecologists, our ecologists, and Natural England and the Wildlife Trust. And so, as I explained earlier, we've got there are those 3 legal agreements. The main one, our sort of side agreement with the trust, and the developers' side agreement with the trust, and that all that mitigation works together so that the Wildlife Trust is funded and able to carry out that mitigation.
But we don't have a total cost of it.
Well,
Councillor Foster.
I might be able to help there. If you look at the supplement to the agenda, which was issued yesterday, it does state on there that the ecology maintenance contribution is 19,748 annually, and that's an agreement between Wiltshire Wildlife Trust and the developer. It's not something we would actually get involved in because it's outside the bat mitigation strategy.
Okay, well,
Thank
let's move on, shall we? Because I'm puzzled by that. The next thing I wanted to ask about is the health and dental contribution, 3.3 million. We don't always see a large figure for health and dental contribution. This is quite a lot. Again, dentists and GPs are private businesses providing their services either privately or to the National Health Service. And who is going to get the 3.39 million, and why is it required by this development?
so the contribution would go to the NHS, so it wouldn't be going to private providers. It's so the NHS, when this application was first submitted, they requested 1.1 million. And then over the years, as they have recalculated the need and generated by this development, that figure has increased to this sort of roughly 3.4 million. They've got identified infrastructure. I believe it's going to the new building that's at the Trowbridge Health Centre at the moment that's being built. Its first half has been built. This contribution would build the other half of that healthcare provision. So it's going all to the NHS. It's not going to private providers.
The affordable housing contribution, 5.4 million for off-site affordable housing. Is there any on-site affordable housing? And could you tell us about the amount of 5.4 million for off-site affordable housing?
Yes. So a number of years ago, it came before this committee where there was viability concerns. And so a lower than normal level of on-site affordable housing was agreed. So the total there you'll see is about 26% across the whole site. And that is broken down to 20% of the first 500 homes would be affordable, 25% of the following 500 homes would be affordable, and then 30% of the remainder, which overall is about 26%. So it was no longer policy compliant, but this committee agreed with that viability assessment. And now matters have changed, and so in the negotiations of all the relevant obligations which are coming forward, some went up, some went down, and so the figure of 5.4 million was released, and by negotiation we've considered that goes to redress that deficit in on-site affordable housing.
So altogether we have, I think, about 80 million of costs on the developer, the lead developer here, and we've been worried for many years about whether this development was viable, whether it was achievable. We see that the developer is broadly willing to enter into Section 106s, where quite recently they were saying that they couldn't do it because they were going to lose money, they were going to be forced to buy the land. Do we now have a position where the developer is willing to shell out the 80 million? And if so, how soon are we planning to put some numbers into our 5-year housing land supply? I think that might be the crunch question as to what is penciled in for the 5-year housing land supply numbers.
Thank you, Chair, through you. So a few questions there just to come back on. So first of all, the NHS payment, as Russell's explained, there's been quite a few changes over the last few years in terms of what the request is. The NHS want to use that money towards the ICC in Trowbridge, which of course has recently got permission. This would then effectively pay for the next phase, but that will be subject to planning permission, and there's obviously a recognition that may or may not go ahead. Hopefully it will, but may or may not. But the NHS has confirmed that if it doesn't, they would use that money to pay for expansion of existing surgeries. So either way, the money will be used. It's just a question of whether or not they can deliver that as part of their priority programme. And this has been discussed in detail with the developers, and they're comfortable that we use the money in that way. Either way, as I say, the residents will get the expansion of facilities, whether it be in the ICC or existing surgeries. In terms of the £5.5 million towards off-site affordable housing, I've already mentioned in terms of how that will be allocated. Clearly, that flexibility is really important. The money would be used to compensate for effectively the difference between the policy compliant position, which is a 30% affordable housing on site, and obviously the reduction that was agreed by this committee several years ago. Now, we had the option to go back and look at viability and to start again and go through another 6 months more of negotiations with the developer, opening up all the discussions around that. It may have ended up that we didn't get back to the 30%. The numbers, the £5.5 million may only have given us a couple of percent on top of that. So we thought on balance that A, it will be much faster. It means we get more housing delivery. It comes back to your final point around numbers, and I'll cover that in a moment. It allows us to bring this back to committee as quick as possible, recognising the long delays that we've had, but also it gives us that flexibility in terms of how we use the money. So all around, that felt like the right package, and actually 26% on-site affordable is a good result from my experience of having worked on many schemes across the country. It's a good result for a development of this size on the edge of a town like Trowbridge. So overall, we're very pleased with that package. Now, the developer has been saying that despite all this, viability is marginal, and they may cover this within their presentation. I know that they're speaking today. So viability is marginal, but they believe this package of infrastructure, including the relief road and the SIL contributions, everything is affordable. That's what they're telling us at the moment. Clearly, this is a long project. It will take 10, 15 years potentially to develop. Depends how quick that they construct. That situation could change, but I'm confident at the moment that we will be able to see all that infrastructure package delivered. In terms of housing numbers, clearly it takes a long time to prepare and develop sites like this, and we have to make accurate assumptions in our housing supply calculations. If we over-egg the pudding and put too many numbers in early, appellants, developers will challenge that at appeal and will end up in a worse position and losing appeals. So I think in this particular case, we've assumed a small number of homes at the back end of our 5-year period, so around year 5, a small number of homes from this development, and that will then ramp up in year 6, 7, 8, etc. We can't...
Like 200 or 300? Or?
It's something like that. It's low numbers. On the scheme of how many we have to deliver per year, it's tiny numbers, less than 5%, I would suggest, but it's... yes, this will really help us in subsequent years. Now, if the situation changes, we review this every year. The developers may actually say, well, they're able to prepare the site quicker, sell houses faster. We may be able to bring forward some of those numbers to earlier in the 5-year period. That will be kept under review, and we'll be absolutely holding the developers to account and pushing hard to make sure we get those first phases, reserve matters, across the line and built out quickly.
Okay, so headline, this is looking pretty disappointing from the 5-year housing land supply picture, isn't it?
It was never intended to cover the first 5 years just because we knew how long it would take. But it's actually positive in that originally we didn't have year 5 in the numbers, now we do. And so that means year 6, it really starts to ramp up. So it's a better position than we were then last time we debated this at committee. But you're right, we can't assume lots of numbers. Yeah.
Okay, okay, thank you much indeed. I've got Councillor Holder and Councillor Cleesby. Councillor Holder.
Thank you, Chair. You'll be pleased to know that one of my questions has been asked and answered from my colleague asked here about the healthcare. My question is, I guess, similar to the question that Councillor Palmain asked about schools. I'm not going to talk about schools. I want to ask the question about the local centres. Specifically, you've explained very clearly that the schools will not be built by the developer and the land will be allocated. What's the situation with the local centres? Do we have a definitive answer on when they will be built and who they will be built by?
They would be built by the developer, and they would come forward in the relevant phase of housing that they sit in. So, and that phasing plan, there we go. So the larger local centre would be in phase 1, which is there, and the second local centre is probably phase 4 by looking at it. That's the secondary school in phase 3, and the local centre is just there. So it would come in the early part of phase 4. And again, they would be marketed. And the larger local centre includes one of those early years provisions that Clara was talking about.
Okay, so up until phase 4, the only local centre will be the one that's built in phase 1. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So that's quite a significant number of houses to be built with a very, very small local centre. I mean, it's a point rather than a question. That's correct, yeah?
So I couldn't hear that. Say that again.
I said, so rather than it being a question, just for clarification, until phase 4 is built, the only local centre for phase 1, 2, 3 of this development is the smaller of the local centres in phase 1. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Thank you. And if I may, I just want to, if I may slightly take issue with one of your comments on page 17, particularly to the question that Councillor Palmain raised in terms of, you do say in your summary, in your second paragraph, the schools will also have wider beneficial consequence, for example, helping to reduce cross-town traffic within Trowbridge. That is, of course, an assumption that the school is actually built. So I would take a slight issue with that comment in your summary, because I don't think factually it's correct. It's probably correct from a planning point of view, but as we've heard this morning, without any definitive knowledge of the school being built, it's an aspiration rather than something that's definitely going to happen. I take the point.
Yeah. Sorry, just to go back a little bit. I've just been informed that the second local centre is in phase 3.
Sorry. So
the smaller local centre is in phase 3, not phase 4. So,
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cleesby.
I just have a couple of things, really questions, and it's more about timing. So can you confirm the mechanisms in place to monitor delivery of that 20%, 25%, 30% in affordable housing thresholds? What mechanisms do we have in place to monitor that delivery? On the same sort of topic, really, is there an obligation for annual reporting to strategic planning on the Section 106 and phasing milestones? Thank you.
the affordable housing, the on-site affordable housing, so for the first 500 homes built, it would be 20% would be affordable, and then they would be through negotiation with our housing team, offered to registered providers, things like that. Then for the following 500 homes, so 500 to 1,000, 25% would be affordable, and then the remainder of the homes would be 30%.
Yes, I understand that.
Sorry.
What I wanted to know was, what's the mechanism for monitoring that they've actually done that?
If I can come in, Chair, so what I would expect is that obviously Subject to outline permission being granted today and the decision issued, there'll be a number of further applications for reserved matters, so the sort of the bite-sized chunks within the phases. And what I would expect with each of those submissions, you know, for public scrutiny and also for our assessment and be part of our reporting, is to confirm the level of delivery of affordable housing per reserved matters. And what they, I imagine there'd be a rolling table accumulation of affordable, but the needs to kind of meet what's set out. So by virtue of there being reserved matters applications, there will be a kind of a regular updating of what's proposed to be delivered and what is actually delivered, and that will be carried out in liaison with our affordable housing colleagues.
Thank you, that's very clear. And does that apply also for, will there be annual reporting to the Strategic Planning Committee with regard to the Section 106 delivery and phasing milestones?
Thank you, Chair. No, we don't report back to Strategic Planning Committee. So performance against all our different areas are measured in different ways. So through Cabinet, we obviously report performance-related issues for whole aspects of our service. Some of these aspects are matters to be delivered by different directorates, if you'll expect. So some of the highways works will be delivered by highway colleagues, some education will be delivered by education colleagues. So they'll be captured in different ways. We don't have a holistic way to report or monitor individual Section 106s in that way and report back to Strategic Planning Committee, partly because we have many agreements and many big schemes, and it would be taking a considerable amount of time to do it that way. Having said that, Section 106 monitoring and reporting and being more transparent to members about how this works is something that's very much on my radar, and it's something that was picked up at an audit a year or two ago that we perhaps need to think about how to be a bit more transparent in the way we do things. So that's something I'll take away, if that's okay, Chair, and perhaps discuss with the Cabinet member about how we can share information a bit clearer about how money coming in and how money is spent on individual obligations of the scale of this, because I appreciate it's significant. So we'll take that away. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's great. I would perhaps suggest, Chair, that we might consider some way of looking where these developments take so long to come to fruition, some kind of annual reporting or update on matters that we've discussed and have gone through might be a good idea for this committee. I just propose that, really. Thank you.
Thanks. I think that's something you can look at afterwards with Mr. Thomas and see if we come up with something that's agreeable to both officers and members. Councillor Greenman.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate that. Couple of questions. I might be overlooking the obvious here, but I just wanted some clarification on this. I noticed that it mentions legal agreements being signed within 5 months, etc., and billed between 2 and 3 years from the date of approval. So I'm slightly bemused. I did pick up on Nick Thomas's remarks a few minutes ago. An application for the reserve matters to be made to the local planning authority before the expiration of 15 years. Now, I noticed Nick mentioned about construct of 12 to 15 years. Potentially, which given the speed at which we would expect legal agreements to be signed, particularly after the protracted length of time this application has taken so far, etc., do we really think that 15 years is reasonable? Is it really going to take that long before we're looking at a construct of this development?
If I can come back, Chair, if that's okay. The positive thing about this application, you'll hear in a moment from the applicants on this, is that we've got multiple developers and they want to build as quick as possible, as you would expect. Commercially, it's in their interest to do that. But they have different products and different ways of bringing forward the site as quick as possible. I'll leave that for them to explain that to you. But the intention is they'll come forward as quick as possible and obviously maximise the development. Now, there's issues around market saturation, market conditions changing during that time period. So the ability to develop a scheme of this scale and complexity with all the infrastructure, you know, much sooner than that will be quite challenging. But I'm sure the developers will tell you they'll develop it very, very quickly and want to get this over the line, you know, within 10 years. So I think all that condition requires is just that flexibility to allow those reserve matters to come in a way that meets the flexible needs of the market. And, yeah, we can't sort of insist that they come in much sooner because conditions change inevitably with these sorts of factors, and some developments take a long time. But yeah, hopefully that it will come forward as soon as possible, and we'll see the development largely built out within 10, 12 years. But yeah, I'm sure the developers will have a view on that.
Thank you for that. In the light of that then, whilst recognising that, I was just asking you to indulge me a bit. I'm just seeking some comfort over the educational provision once again. We come back to that. Whilst I recognise that the birth rate has fallen, the population in Wiltshire itself, of course, has increased by 8.4% between 2011 and 2021. So it's difficult to see how a falling birth rate is going to continue to fall. And given that potentially we could say have 10,000, we could be increasing the population of Trowbridge by 10,000 on this development alone. We have a good percentage of affordable housing, which I warmly welcome. I think we have to consider that will be largely accommodated by young families. What happens if that trend over the construction period reverses and we find out that we have real difficulties then with educational provision? I just want to have some comfort that we have either the capacity or the capability to provide that educational provision without, as we've already been talking, and I apologise for coming back to this once again, undue pressure on surrounding roads, on Trowbridge itself, because I have to consider that whilst there might be schools that have 30, 40, 50 here or a couple of dozen somewhere else, that probably isn't tenable. I would like to think that we had provision for more than we are possibly considering at the moment, actually within this site itself, given those dynamics, given those metrics that I've just given you. Thank you.
Does anybody wish to come back on that? Yeah.
Do you want me to? Okay. So our modelling for education, we have to follow very strict guidelines set by the DFE because we have to submit those forecasts to the DFE every year. And whilst the population of Wiltshire might have grown as a whole, that's mainly in the older age groups. Our under 18s population is contracting. Our largest year groups are currently midway through secondary school and will be feeding into post-16 over the next couple of years. Our cohorts coming into reception and our birth rate, it's dropped by about 150 per cohort. So obviously over the all of the 7 year groups in a primary school, that's a considerable decrease for the schools. What we do is we obviously secure as much funding from developments when they come forward as possible. And that's not just this development, that's all others as well. And then every year we have to do a return to the Department for Education with our forecasts and the numbers that we are forecasting. If there's a discrepancy, as in we've got a demand that outstrips the amount of money that we've been able to secure from Section 106, then we receive a DFE grant called Basic Need, and the council then uses the Basic Need funding for the difference, because obviously in some places, our military towns, our deficits in places aren't always caused as a result of housing. It's not always new housing that causes fluctuations in the birth rate. We know from the DFE and the Office for National Statistics that they are not forecasting a birth rate increase until at least the mid-2030s. And even then, they don't think we'll get back to the levels that we saw around the sort of 2010, 2015 peak that we saw, which is obviously at the time when this development was first proposed. We were in a completely different place with a growing school population, and now it's significantly tailed off. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's very helpful. That's the kind of information I wanted. Thank you.
And Chair, if I could just help provide further reassurance and guidance for the committee. Of course, the committee, in determining the application today, you have to go on the basis of what is known now, the evidence before you now. And I think the package of 106 mitigation is really extensive. And just for example, in terms of the ability to make some early decisions about provision for things like schools, the trigger for both the transfer of the first primary school site and the secondary school site is at the 400th occupation. Whilst that's in sometime in the future, bearing in mind that we're looking at up to 2,500 homes here, that's at a relatively early stage of delivery of the site. So that will allow that kind of factoring in of new population information, etc. as well.
Okay, thank you much indeed. Councillor White.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your hard work. I'd like to come back to the school situation again. Just to help me understand better. Everything I've heard so far today and read suggests the likelihood of the secondary school being built is declining by the minute. What will happen to that land if we don't build on it? That's the first part of the question. Second, if we're wrong and Wiltshire's young population is growing much faster than we expected, we don't have enough money to build a secondary school because we've taken it away and given it somewhere else. So what would happen in either case? Have you discussed this? What are the plans? What will happen to this land if we don't build school? And if we do, where are we going to get the funding from to build it?
Chair, I'll come in on the first one, but I'll let Clara answer the second one. We have a period of time, of course, by which we can take over this land, and then we can obviously develop that for a secondary school if we feel that is appropriate. However, if we don't exercise that right to take over that land, then the developer would retain it and be able to develop that. So in theory, that would come forward. But if they did that, that would be completely separate to this process. It would go through the normal new planning application process. And any additional education or other requirements as part of that would have to be factored in as well. So that's a theoretical argument for the future, but in theory, the developer could then bring it forward for development, and that will be considered in its own way at the appropriate time. But a long way into the future, you know. I'll let Claire answer the second question, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Griffin.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So when we consider sites as they come forward, the order in which they come forward is very important. Obviously, the effect on education is cumulative. The more developments you have, the more places you need. So this development was first, they put in their application a long time ago and way before most of the other sites in Warminster. So this development was almost first in the queue for the allocation of surplus places in the existing schools, which is why they've been given such a significant reduction on the total number of pupils that will be generated. But we already have signed Section 106 agreements from around 10 other sites that I can think of in Trowbridge that are providing secondary school places, and all applications that now come forward, you know, the surplus places that are available in these schools can only be allocated to one housing development. We can't obviously fill them with more than one child. So for future developments, they will be asked for full secondary contributions. We can pool contributions from as many developments as we can. There's no limit on that anymore. For a while in the SIL regs, there was a limit of 5 contributions that could be pooled towards any one school. That is not the case anymore. So we will continue to secure up contributions. And obviously it's not just from Trowbridge itself, but the secondary schools provide education for a much wider geographical area, including the villages around Trowbridge, Holt, for instance. So all those contributions will be pooled. But as I've already explained, we do also have the ability to secure basic need funding from the DFE if there's a difference between the numbers we are forecasting and the amount we've secured in basic need. Section 106.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Griffin.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 questions. One is about the commercial area, which has been earmarked. Has it been determined at what stage in the phasing of the housing development this will be brought on stream? Clearly, in the overall sort of employment scenario for Trowbridge as a town, and particularly for employment opportunities for the occupiers of these dwellings, that could be a significant factor. And my second is, we've heard, we've seen, we've got about
25 million from section 106, 7 million or so from SIL, and about 35 million contribution to the roads enhancements. That's a total of 72 million, which equates to about £29,000 per house. Are we confident that that is affordable by the developers?
Thanks. I'll answer the second question, which I think is the easier of the two, which is, the reason why we go through viability testing on any development is to, to scrutinise whether, at the end of the day, in terms of delivering a development, whether if that's the 106 that was completed, could the development then be taken forward? It's in our interests as a local authority, but equally, even more so, it's in the interest of the developers. If they're if they're seeking planning permission and they're signing a legal agreement that commits them to triggers of payments and contributions, that they can then carry forward the development that they're proposing. And that's why there's often this kind of debate throughout a viability process in terms of what can be afforded and can't be afforded. Obviously, this has got a very long history to it. And so, at the end of the day, it's a commercial decision for the applicants to then press go on the development. But everything I've heard to date and the confidence that we've all entered into a viability process, and the 106 and the other agreements are poised to be signed depending on the decision today, leads me to think that yes, it is affordable and is realistic. I think the first question was about the timing of the employment land. At the end of the day, that we can't force development of employment floor space, because quite often it's it's quite unusual, say, for a speculative development to be built, because that's never usually what the occupier would want. I think it's all kind of then comes down to the marketing strategy. I'm not sure myself about the trigger for the marketing strategy.
No, I can't remember the timing for that, but it is in the 106 that they do need to do that level of marketing, which I just can't remember exactly when that would kick in.
I think, overall, we'd say that's a reasonable approach, that there is an obligation on the developers to start marketing that employment land. And I think hopefully allied then with our economic development colleagues, we can then do whatever we can to generate interest on there, because it's in everyone's interest to get that land for employment developed and occupied.
Yeah, thank you. I've got one question to ask about the highways, because I think the chap is going to come back with an answer to Councillor Newbury about the roundabouts. What thoughts has Wiltshire Council or the applicants given to the upgrading of the A350? What difference that's going to make to the access for the Scouts, the wooded area?
Okay, if I may answer, well, I'll answer the Scouts one first of all. So access to the Scouts forms part of the Section 278 agreement for delivery of the road. So it is a direct consideration. So the road is fully safety audited, and access to the Scout huts was considered at the time of design. In terms of Councillor Newbury's query, which was querying the assertion that there is a reduction in traffic at Longlegs roundabout, having checked our strategic modelling for that area, what is actually happening at a very local level is the southbound traffic on Westbury Road is diverting onto the Yarnbrook Relief Road rather than going down to Longlegs roundabout to access the A350. Now, what that does, that reduces the traffic on that one arm by 493 vehicles, but overall across the junction, that is a reduction of 22%, and that is between a baseline of 2018 and a forecast year of 2038 with all of the core strategy development built out. So that's what's happening. It's a very local diversion that directly affects that roundabout rather than the wider area.
I think you're saying that there's a reduction in the traffic on the A350 from Yarnbrook to Westbury. Is that right?
No, that is not what I'm saying. So it is very localised. So the traffic that would be coming down southbound on Westbury Road, which would reach Longlegs roundabout, is not all there, because there is an intervention. There is another roundabout which provides them with access to the relief road to travel eastbound on the A350. So there's no point in that traffic going beyond that roundabout, accessing Longlegs to access the A350 when it has a much shorter route to access that much longer journey. So that's what the traffic is doing at that very local level. Ultimately, along the full corridor of the A350, with growth, strategic growth, plus the delivery of our core strategy development, traffic will increase. But very locally, it is being diverted away from Longlegs roundabout.
So the traffic on the A350 from Yarnbrook to Westbury goes up and not down, is that it?
It will do, yes. Yes.
Okay, so how does that solve the problem of congestion at Yarnbrook, which is where the worst congestion is at the moment?
Because there is a diversion to Longlegs roundabout. There is an opportunity for that southbound traffic to divert away from Longlegs roundabout.
Sorry, I don't know where Longlegs... Can you show us where Longlegs roundabout is?
It is actually slightly further to the west. So, no, to the west and to the south. So if you can imagine traffic coming southbound on Westbury Road, if you can follow the cursor down, it will hit that first roundabout and access the relief road for that eastbound journey. Now, what it won't do is travel further south to Longlegs roundabout.
Sorry, where is Longlegs roundabout? I'm struggling.
It's virtually, it's just down below the cursor.
Is it the one just to the east of the railway line?
Yes, it is. So it's the one with the petrol station and the pub.
Okay, so if there's less traffic on the Longs Arms roundabout and more traffic on that roundabout, where does it go if it's heading on the A350 direction?
It could be going anywhere. It's part of the north-south route between the Midlands and the South Coast. So in reality, it's a regional route. So it's a regionally important route.
I'm struggling to understand, but I think you're saying that there's no reduction in the congestion at Yarnbrook. Is that right?
No, I'm saying that there is a 22% reduction in traffic at Yarnbrook at Longlegs roundabout. And the reason why that is, I'll quickly go through this again. So,
but Longlegs doesn't have the A350 traffic on it at the moment, does it?
Longlegs does.
The A350 traffic goes from Westbury to Haywood, round the Longs Arms roundabout, and up the length of the A350, which you're saying is going to be closed off.
So Longlegs roundabout has the A350, which comes from the south north into the Longlegs roundabout and then travels east northeast. Then you've got Hawkridge Road and you've got the A363, which is Westbury Road, coming southbound into that junction. Now, the A363, which is Westbury Road, will have a roundabout north of Longlegs roundabout. Now, that roundabout will provide you with access to the relief road, because what the relief road is doing is relieving traffic from that junction. And that relief is to the tune of 493 vehicles, which won't travel between those two roundabouts. The new roundabout will redirect that traffic onto the relief road. So therefore, it's a very localized diversion, which specifically affects that junction. But what it doesn't do is reduce traffic overall, because of course traffic is going to increase with development proposed in both our core strategy and our emerging local plan.
Right, I'm sure everybody's not quite certain about that. Councillor Broughtingham, is there anybody else after Councillor Broughtingham that wishes to speak before we go to the public? No, Councillor Chris.
Just a very quick one. On that relief road, just to close off that conversation, are we really comfortable of the timing of it? So it will be done before any major sort of construction starts on the rest of it? Because it's, there's going to be a lot of extra movement, heavy construction stuff.
Yes, I mean, the relief road itself will take a long time to build out. It's a significant piece of infrastructure. So it is down to be completed prior to the 1000th occupation or within 5 years from the first occupation on site, whichever's the sooner. So they will be developing it sort of concurrently with their housing because it needs to have that date, that end stop delivery date.
Okie dokie, if that's all the questions from members of the committee, I have Mr Brown and Mr Morland to speak against the application, Mr Gantlett, Mr Price in favour, Mr Allen, representing the Town Council, Councillor Vaughan from Trowbridge Park wishes to speak, and finally it'll be Councillor Adrian Foster, who's the Cabinet Member for Strategic Planning, Development, Management and Housing. So if I could go to Mr Brown, who's the Chair for the Jubilee Wood Management Committee. So you have up to 3 minutes.
Wiltshire West Scouts have made representations at nearly every previous occasion that this application has been considered, and we remain very concerned at the safety of the access onto the A350 from our Jubilee Wood Scout campsite. Traffic on the A350 has increased significantly since the original application, and we request that this committee task the developer and council officials to work with us to find a suitable alternative access, as you have done in the past, thus safeguarding future generations of Wiltshire's young people. We have proposed several safer access routes to our campsite, but each one has been turned down. We would prefer to come up with a solution before any of our young visitors become casualties or fatalities, God forbid, on the A350. Traffic flows will no longer be interrupted by the lights at Stony Gutter and West Ashton following this development. Therefore, we need to find an access which does not involve the A350. To our mind, the safest option would be a new track onto the West Ashton Road, and would suggest using the developer's yard access beside Larkrise Farm as the point of our track access after the new road is constructed. Our traffic volumes will be much lower than the developers. Please help our young people access their activities safely around what is a heavy goods route. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And Mr Moreland, you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. As the agenda report says, this application was made 10 years ago and has been before this committee 4 times previously, most of which I attended. As the Supreme Court ruled recently, other councils have standing orders which prevent members voting on planning applications unless they have attended all meetings which previously considered them. This is an allocated site, so the tilted balance does not apply to it. And you should treat the stuff in the agenda report on that subject as irrelevant. In my opinion, this application should have been refused at least 5 years ago for one simple reason: the failure of the applicants to complete and sign Section 106 agreements. That would have enabled this council to draw a line under the major failure of its spatial planning policy, the quick fix approach of the Wiltshire Core Strategy, which was never delivered and has not only caused the collapse of strategic planning in the West Wilts housing market area, but has also led to the consequences of a lack of a 5-year housing land supply, which has adversely impacted the whole county. If the applicants had gone to appeal, they would have had to sign Section 106 agreements before the close of the inquiry, so the current position could not have arisen. Everything that is now being said on that subject has been said 3 or 4 times previously, and I have no confidence that the outcome will be any different. The 2,500 dwellings will probably take at least 20 years to build out, almost to the end of the Wiltshire Local Plan 2020-2038, now before the examination inspectors. Draft Policy 76 of that plan removes the previous exemption of Trowbridge from the general 40% affordable housing requirement in the Wiltshire Core Strategy. So it seems to me that to avoid your decision today undermining that policy for years to come by setting a precedent that all other developers will follow, you need to insist that this application, with its new environmental statement, meets that standard, 40%, for the quantum of affordable housing in it, as soon as the Wiltshire Local Plan is adopted, probably well before any of these 2,500 dwellings are actually built. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Moreland. Very good points. And move on to the supporters. Have Mr Gantlett of Persimmon Homes.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I'm John Gantlett. I'm the Land and Planning Director for Persimmon Homes Wessex. Persimmon's been the lead developer for Ashton Park, and I've been involved with the project myself for the past 18 months. I'm here this morning to update you on the significant progress made since the committee last approved the application. Thanks to the hard work of council officers and stakeholders, past and present, I'm pleased to be able to reiterate some of the significant milestones that have been reached in the past 18 months. We've updated the full suite of environmental surveys to ensure the application is robust and up to date. Persimmon has an established partnership with the Wiltshire Wildlife Trust relating to the Green Lane Nature Park. We've now agreed, and we signed the contracts this morning, that Ashton Park will secure nearly 40 acres of additional land for ecological improvement, together with the long-term funding towards a full-time warden to manage and enhance the Green Lane Nature Park. The payments are around £69,000, as mentioned earlier, and are secured in perpetuity. I'm afraid it is a commercially sensitive matter between us and the Wildlife Trust as to how these payments are secured, but it has been ratified by Natural England and the council officers. We've agreed the final form of the primary Section 106 agreement. We've achieved technical approval from the council's highway team for the new Relief Road and the West Ashton Road accesses, which is as far as we can take them without the planning permission being in place, and puts us on good stead to deliver the Relief Road as expected. We've secured conditional contracts with all the landowners, ensuring the land can be acquired promptly following a grant of a satisfactory planning permission. We've formed a 50-50 delivery partnership with Barratt Redrow, enabling earlier delivery of high-quality homes, infrastructure, and community benefits for local people. Together, these milestones mean the planning permission could now be granted, subject of course to your approval and the signing of the Section 106 agreements. This is an incredibly comprehensive outline planning application as it stands today. It brings enormous benefits to Trowbridge, as we've already heard about this morning. There's land available and financial payments for the schools. We'll provide over 30 acres of employment land in local centres. We'll make 2 kilometres of the River Biss open for public use and enjoyment, as well as delivering hundreds of new affordable homes, helping to tackle Wiltshire's housing waiting list. The scheme will also deliver wide benefits to Wiltshire and your constituents, including the provision of the new £36.5 million Relief Road, which is expected to relieve the traffic burden within the town, as well as in the villages of Yarnbrook and West Ashton. The scheme will also accelerate the delivery of much needed high quality new houses in a location long identified for growth and allocated in the local plan. Thank you for your time in discussing this matter, and I'll hand over to my colleague Ryan, who's speaking on behalf of Barratt Redrow.
Thank you very much indeed. And as you say, go to Mr Price, Barratt Redrow. Sir, you have up to 3 minutes.
Good morning, Chair, committee members and members of the public. My name is Ryan Price and I am a project manager speaking on behalf of Barratt Redrow. Whilst the application under consideration here today has a relatively long history, Barratt Redrow has more recently committed to deliver this development in partnership with Persimmon Homes. At Barratt Redrow, we are excited to be involved in such a significant and ambitious scheme. Together as two of the UK's largest national house builders, we bring a wealth of experience in successfully delivering projects of this scale, ensuring meaningful stakeholder engagement and working closely with the communities impacted. In regards to engagement, I just want to assure the attendees here today that as a project manager who specialises in the delivery of large strategic projects, I believe it is imperative that proper developer forums are held with all stakeholders, including the Planning Authority, County Council officers, town and parish councils and local residents. Both Barratt Redrow and Persimmon are absolutely committed to this level of communication. This development offers substantial benefits to the local area and the wider authority, including a £36 million relief road to relieve the impact on the local highway network, and approximately 2 kilometres of new open space along the River Biss corridor to enhance landscape and ecology. The scheme will deliver capital contributions totaling £25.6 million, comprising £14.1 million for education, £3.3 million for healthcare and £1.1 million for bus service enhancements. In addition, the project will generate a community infrastructure levy of £7.5 million to support local initiatives, with a portion allocated directly to parish and town councils. We'd like to thank Wiltshire County Council's officers, legal teams and the consultant design team for their dedication and expertise they have contributed towards the scheme so far. Barratt Homes is an award-winning developer with a long-standing commitment to quality. For the past 15 consecutive years, we have achieved 5-star builder status based on customer satisfaction and recommendation. Like Wiltshire Council, we are committed to the sustainable development and delivering affordable, high-quality homes that meet the needs of the current and future residents of Wiltshire. Together with our development partners, we are preparing a number of reserve matters planning applications covering both infrastructure and residential phases. We have already initiated early engagement through the pre-application process, allowing us to share our vision and aspirations. We remain fully committed to working with the design review panel, and for the first parcels, we are submitting a joint developer application ensuring the initial phases of development are fully coordinated. Our aim is to begin the delivery of these much-needed new homes as soon as possible and ahead of council expectations in a 5-year land supply and via multiple outlets and our multiple brands, Barratt, Persimmon, David Wilson, Charles Church, Redrow and Westbury, contributing significantly to the council's housing supply and our shared goal of creating a great place to live at Ashton Park in Trowbridge. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Almost exactly, excuse me, almost exactly 3 minutes. We now have Mr. Allen representing the Trowbridge Town Council, and Mr. Allen, you have up to 4 minutes.
Thank you. You'll be glad to know that I'm not here to accuse Wiltshire Council of bad geography again. No, I am here to look back over the past 20 years. 20 years of restricted growth in Trowbridge. A town council that is looking to make its community better, with improved facilities provided both by the private and public sectors, a new civic centre, new sports and leisure facilities and cinemas, as well as the redevelopment of brownfield sites, needs to be one which supports growth. Trowbridge Town Council has supported development to the southeast of the town since a time before it was known as Ashton Park, and even before the core strategy was first consulted upon. The Town Council has continued to support this development, continues to offer to take on a range of community facilities and green space maintenance on the majority of the site, and is supportive that the phasing sees connection to the town for sustainable transport options, including walking and cycling to reach the town centre, maintained throughout the development period. It is a shame that this development has taken so long to come to fruition, and the time taken indicates that, hopefully, all relevant issues have been resolved satisfactorily. But it is also hoped that Wiltshire Council does not make the same mistake again of supporting allocations of this size in similar locations within sensitive ecological zones close to one of our principal settlements, but significantly more remote from the town centre, secondary schools and other facilities than Ashton Park. One specific issue: the footpath from phase 1 of the development to the employment land, it is said, is due to remain closed until 75% of the employment site is complete. So, if I was a future resident living on phase 1 and worked in one of the employment units, and the remainder of the employment site is not completed, I cannot use the most convenient route to walk to work. Could this be changed so that the footpath is open when the first unit on the employment site is open?
Thank you, Mr. Allen. That's very useful. I'm sure somebody can have a look at that to see whether that would be possible. We now move on to local member Chris Vaughan from Trowbridge Park, and if I could ask you to keep to 5 minutes if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll speak as quick as I can, as I've got so much to say. Firstly, I completely agree with Councillor Newman's comments on the relief road at the Yarnbrook end. I'm a complete novice and a layman, but to me, it does look like, although we did have a very good answer, but to me, it looks like we're basically just changing the traffic to go to the roundabout at the Long's Arms end, and we're putting it just to the left of the railway bridge. So the only difference I see there is we're basically concentrating the traffic in a different direction. The only difference being it is possibly, plus 10,000 people. This does affect my ward hugely. In fact, part of my ward will be encompassed into this development. So there's obviously going to be a lot of residents that are going to be concerned about this. So I do understand there's passionate arguments both for and against. But I do ask those people that are for this development that, using terms like NIMBYs and such like, is probably not helpful where, unless you've actually experienced this of, long-term construction, maybe up to 10, 15 years, something like that, on your doorstep does create a lot of concern and is a massive upheaval. So I just ask those people to be respectful to them. That being said, I do understand that we do need housing. We have a real need for housing, and it's very good for our economy. So that being said, I think the best thing that I can do and focus on, and my best efforts and energy can be focused on how do we deliver quality homes with a good design in the least disruption that we possibly can. So the way I think we should do that is that we do our job as a council the best way we can, so we get everything in place before we start. Once we've got everything in place in terms of schools and infrastructure and all the rest of it, the best thing we can do is hand over to the house builders, of which I've worked for all of these house builders over the years. And although I have my gripes and concerns, I do say that they are very professional outfits and they are very slick operations. So I think that we should hand over to them once we've done our work and allow them to get on with their job the best way they possibly can. Because any changes along the way, any things that we want to do differently is just going to impact on them and the speed that they build the houses are. But with one massive condition, and the condition is we're going to get an awful lot of inquiries from residents, rightly so, with concerns. So we need to have a very good relationship as councillors with these people, and I've had already good interactions with the people of Persimmon's Homes. So when we have the questions from our residents, we can give them answers that are not just wishy-washy answers, very nicely put, but very wishy-washy with not too much content, but we get answers that have decent content and that we can allay their fears and concerns properly as this goes forward. One other thing that I would just quickly say too is that I think that if we want to get the best quality and well-designed homes as possible, I think that we definitely need to, as I say, allow the house builders to do their job as best as we can. And as I say, we need to make sure that we work with them the best we can. And so let's get the best relationship we can with the house builders to make sure this goes as smoothly as it possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. And finally, Councillor Adrian Foster, who is the Cabinet Member for Strategic Planning, Development Management and Housing. And Adrian, if I could ask you to keep it 5 minutes if possible, please.
I will try and keep well within the 5 minutes, Mr. Chair. And thank you for the opportunity to give me the chance to speak. This application is part of Wiltshire Council's Strategic Housing and Development Plan, which many of us have learnt over time is very different to a speculative planning application, of which we have seen far too many. Due to the fact that Wiltshire Council has not been able to provide the 5-year land supply. Anybody on this committee will have memories of that over the 5 years we've been here. These applications are of great essence to us, much more complicated and with so many more active participants. And the changing markets, in particular the housing market, take longer to complete these developments. Those who've been in Strategic Planning Committee longer than me will realise this is one of the most complicated applications we've had to consider. It is nonetheless one that is strategically important to this council. Like many applications, it is not perfect, and we will all see different aspects that we feel need improving. But with all things that involve money, people, the environment, compromise does need to be made. I personally am disappointed that the level of affordable housing is lower than we would prefer, and that it is affordable and not social housing. I am, though, pleased that the applicant has mitigated this by providing a sizable and significantly large enough sum of money via the Section 106 agreement to help provide further social housing for this community. Unlike many applications that we have come before this committee, It is well thought out and provides most of the administration's preferred requisites, such as active travel, routes which allocation of appropriate schools, local centres and an enhanced bus service, none of which we see in speculative developments. In essence, this is an allocated housing and employment site in the core strategy. The scheme will deliver much needed housing and employment land crucial to supporting this council's housing land supply and emerging local plan. I would therefore encourage the committee to approve this application, and this is even though it's at outland planning application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Before we go to debate, do the officers wish to respond to any of the points made, please?
I just wanted to pick up on something that Councillor Vaughan said about the disturbance to local people. The conditions include the provision of a very detailed and comprehensive construction management plan, which will cover everything from working hours to coordinating delivery, so you don't have trucks lining up on the street. So that level of sort of neighbouring amenity has been completely thought out, and also. Perhaps I should go back to the phasing plan. So in terms of housing, the development starts close to Trowbridge and then it works its way south broadly. So yes, there will be disturbance to existing residents, initially, but from there, once the phase 1 houses are built, it's really impacting on itself, if you know what I mean, the houses it's just built. So we're confident that residential amenity will be perfectly well managed.
Yes, Chair, and just to address the very good point made by the Town Council, normally there would be absolute encouragement to link residential and employment uses. My understanding is, and it's one of the heads of terms of the Section 106 agreement, that's driven by protection of bat habitat. So that's the thing, why there's that what appears to be an unusual limitation on providing that link, but I understand it's through to protect bat habitats, and that does carry a lot of weight really in terms of that. So normally we would say as soon as possible, but for that reason it has to be, the trigger has to be that relatively late, unfortunately.
Okay, we're now open the item for debate, and could I point out...
Chair, if I may,
Yep.
I'm sorry, before you open to debate, please may I ask this one question? I'm rather confused about the comments about land supply, particularly given what Councillor Foster just said, because Nick Thomas was asked a question earlier on as to whether this development would have a significant impact upon the housing land supply. And I think in his answer to Councillor Newbury, he said, no, it didn't. But Councillor Foster has just said that it does in his, I think, in his penultimate or final sentence. Could we have some clarification, please, as to exactly what this will do in terms of our 5-year land supply? Because I've heard confusing messages this morning.
Chair, if I may help with this one. So there's different aspects of housing land supply. There's the housing land supply situation upon the grant of planning permission. So the question I asked to Councillor Newbury was around, does this upon grant of planning permission change the position in terms of our housing land supply? And the answer is no, because the delivery of these units are at the back end of the period. There's a separate issue here around the local plan and the importance of this strategically going forward in terms of the housing numbers that we've going to be bringing forward. And clearly this is an important component of our housing delivery as part of our wider strategic growth for our local plan and the numbers that we want to bring forward, as I say, through that strategy. And beyond the 5-year period, this will have a huge impact, of course, in terms of as the development come forward, the numbers that will be delivered through this scheme will contribute significantly to our housing land supply situation. So overall, strategically, it's really important, but it won't have that immediate effect upon the grant of planning permission. So it's a slightly different issue.
Thank you. So is it fair to say that this is important because it will be delivered within the context of the local plan, which has housing numbers in it, which will have housing numbers for Trowbridge and across the whole of Wiltshire, which, as we know, is under examination and runs to 2038, but it won't specifically have an impact upon the lack of housing land supply, 5-year housing land supply right now. Am I correct in that definition, Nick?
Yes, it will have that immediate impact now, so it's linked to the local plan. But even if the local plan wasn't successful, hopefully that won't happen, but even if that wasn't successful, in year 6, 7, 8, etc., it will then kick in and have a positive impact, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, Councillor Holder. So we now open it for debate, and I would point out that the office recommendation has been updated in supplement 3. And I would hopefully find that whoever speaks first will move something. I think we have a local member on the committee. If Councillor Broughton, do you wish to commence, or? So can you use the button, please?
My apologies. I would just propose we move the, we've heard everything today. I would suggest I propose to move the motion forward recommendation.
Thanks. That's the amended, that says amended in supplement 3.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a seconder for that, please? Councillor Parman.
Yeah,
Thank you. So, right, that is the debate. So I open it to members of the committee. Councillor Newbury.
Thank you, Chairman. This is really difficult. Mr. Morland poses the question, should we be refusing this? Because then we would perhaps get the applicant going to appeal and the applicant having to provide unilateral declarations to the inspector, and that would resolve it. I'm not really sure about that, because we're told by officers that the Section 106 agreements have been agreed. The one with the Wildlife Trust was signed today. So it does appear as if the two developers are ready to sign up to the 106 agreement. So I'm not sure that refusing this would end up with a better outcome on the Section 106 agreement. Where I'm really struggling with support for this, Chairman, and I have been at every previous stage, is that we have something called, we have a project for 2,500 houses, costs to be loaded onto the development of about 80 million. I made my sum come to a little bit more than 80 million. Officers may, but it's that sort of ballpark figure. And 35 million of that is for a relief road scheme, which I have always found a total absurdity. I mean, we look at the scheme on the plan there. It's called the Yarnbrook to West Ashton Relief Road. The relief that is given by that £35 million scheme appears to me to be to a handful of houses between the Long's Arms roundabout at Yarnbrook and the West Ashton Crossroads. I think there might be about 10 or 12 around the West Ashton Crossroads. There might be about 7 or 8 between the Long's Arms roundabout and West Ashton. And those are the people who are getting traffic relief. There's a £35 million scheme here, which is simply moving the A350 traffic and the traffic going from Yarnbrook towards Frome in slightly different directions. But it's the same amount of traffic. In fact, it's more traffic. And the relief being given by this project is to an astonishingly small... So we have a major road scheme costing more than the Westbury Bypass when we last saw it, which was planned to give traffic relief to a very wide area. And this development is, I think, being held up for years and years and years on the basis of what I look on as a completely absurd road scheme. So I'm still sceptical about whether it will ever happen and doubtful about supporting it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Newbury. Could I just clarify with both the proposer and seconder that we're happy with the new condition 25, with delegating authority to finalise the wording of that condition? Yeah, thank you. Right. Councillor Parman, you, as a seconder, you can speak later if you wish to, but you can speak now.
It's kind of a question about that. We didn't answer the Scout Hut side of things, did we? Or did I miss that? We did not.
I think Councillor Palmer's just mentioning again about the fact that if the A350 is going to be upgraded by, the government wants to upgrade it, do we still think, or does the council still think that the proposed access
Yeah,
is
so
going to be
Rob did
safe
answer
in
that,
the
but I'll ask him
future.
to, yeah, I'll ask Rob to answer that again, Chair, thank you.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
This goes back to the public session when the Scout people were concerned about their access onto the 350. And would it not be better to put a track going down to the new roundabout down near West Ashton? Well, that's how I presumed, but that's what they're suggesting.
Yes, is the brutal answer. Wherever we can get local access rather than accessing a fast A road would always be advocated. Whether that is both within the remit or reasonable to apply to the development here today, I don't think that's for me to answer, but yes, I would certainly agree with that more local connection.
So we can assume, or this committee can say that they would expect the officers to work towards getting a safer access down onto the roundabout rather than a sort of T-junction onto the 350.
That sounds reasonable.
Thank you. Right, go back to the committee for
Could we add that as an informative then to the decision?
Yeah.
I was going to suggest an informative. We'll do our best to work with the developers to resolve that, yeah.
Oh, okay, so that will be part of the motion that the informative is put in there as well. Does anybody else wish to speak on this? Councillor Holden.
Thank you, Chair. I found it interesting here today, and I am going to be supporting the application based upon the debate today and what's in Supplement 3. I think what's really swung it for me is as somebody who represents a division which has had significant amounts of development in the last few years and is due to have significant more development going forward, what pleases me about this application is it seems to be coming forward with what we refer to in Bower Hill as a sense of place. There are houses being built, but there is infrastructure being built suggested in terms of bus route improvement, in terms of public open space, in terms of school provision, and importantly in terms of, for the residents, the local centres. And I think we should be welcoming developments of this type, not necessarily of this size, where there has clearly been a well thought through dialogue between our officers and the developer to make sure that even though we are building potentially 2,500 homes, we are actually providing a sense of place and a sense of community. And for those reasons, I will be supporting the application.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish? Oh, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just like to reiterate Councillor Holder's remarks. To be honest, I think given the length of time this application has been under consideration, it's obvious that a huge amount of very detailed work and analysis has gone on over the years. And I do, I think you can see that the sort of cooperation, collaboration between the developers and officers, in every aspect of this. And as Councillor Holder says, they've been creating a new space here, new homes, new industries, new open spaces, ecological areas, potentially schools as well. I think it looks very well thought through. And given that this is part of the plan, the long-term plan, I think we should be supporting it, because so often this committee, and I sit on Northern Area Planning as well, so often we've seen speculative developments in greenfield sites that have come through with none of this infrastructure associated. We barely can get footpaths, that connect up with the existing towns. So I think this is such a welcome contrast, really. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Can I say, as one of the few members that have actually sat through this for the last 10 years, that if this is passed today, I'm sure none of us want to see it come back in another few years with the applicant saying, oh, we haven't got time to do the 106. Can we give it to have another few years, please? I think the time is really coming to get on with this. If nobody else wishes to speak, Councillor Broughtingham as the proposer, you can sum up and then we go directly to the vote.
Right. Yes, I still have a uncomfortable with regards to the relief road, but we are where we are there, and that's it. I presume there's also going to be a conversation with West Ashton Parish Council for the boundaries. Will they need to be adjusted? So yeah, there is that. Yes, for me, and as I said, the whole traffic thing is a worry. But again, where Westbury is, where Trowbridge is, where the other, you know, the traffic's going to go round. So I think we've got to live with that. But building on Councillor Vaughan's point about to try and make it as painless as possible as we can for all of the residents that are going to be one way or another, and particularly the people around Yarnbrook. Anything we can do to help will be appreciated, I'm sure. On the basis of that, I said I'd like to propose we move the recommendation forward.
Okay, thank you much indeed. So with that, I would ask for those in favour, the show of hands. Those against? Abstentions? 1. Okay, that is approved. As I say, it's according to the amendment in the supplement 3 with a bit about condition 25. So thank you, committee, and thank you, members of the public, for your time. If I adjourn for 15 minutes for a comfort break, and if you want to grab a quick coffee or anything, and we will resume at 10:02, so that's in 15 minutes. Now we're all back to reconvene the meeting at 12:54. Item 8, application PL 2023-02129, land to the south of A3102, east of Royal Wootton Basset, and go to Adrian Walker, Planning Manager, to present his report.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to give you a quick update on the revised condition list that was circulated yesterday. There was an amendment to condition 4, which basically just added the highways plans as part of the approved plans list. The other conditions that were updated were the highways conditions. The main changes to these were the agreed triggers to prevent any delay to the commencement of development. There was also the removal of condition 22, requiring a travel plan for the nursery. It was agreed that this could be placed upon the reserved matters approval for the nursery rather than this outline, as it will be taken forward by the council and not the applicant. So as you can see on the screen, this is an outline planning application for up to 410 dwellings, land for a nursery school, public open space, landscaping and associated infrastructure. The application was originally called to committee by Councillor Bucknell due to the significant departure from the adopted development plan. Since then, Councillor Matthews became the divisional member and has confirmed that the application should remain called in for determination. The officer's recommendation is to approve outline planning permission subject to the revised conditions list, the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement, and the receipt of a signed and countersigned IACPC, which I'll come back to a little bit later in the ecology section. The site here up on the screen is outlined in red. It's approximately 27 hectares of open farmland. It's located about 1.8 kilometres east of Royal Wootton Basset town centre. Surrounding the site, there is to the north the A3102 Swindon Road and Sally Pussey's Inn. To the west, this road here is an unnamed road which leads down to Bicknell Lane, and you can see further residential development to the west. To the south is more of Bicknell Lane, and to the east is Wickfield Lane, which is a rural lane. So the site consists of several fields separated by hedgerows. It gently slopes from north to south, and there are 2 public footpaths that cross the site. The WBAS 28, which goes west to south, and the WBAS 27, which goes south to east. Lower Woodshaw Farm, a Grade 2 listed building, is located about 100 metres to the south of the site, which is the nearest designated heritage asset there. So this slide shows the parameter plan for the outline development, which sets the fixed parameters of up to 410 homes, approximate location in the orange, nursery school land, which is the pink here. It indicates heights of up to 10 metres, which is approximately 2.5 stories, but it will predominantly be 2 stories. The green shows multifunctional green space, including sustainable urban drainage systems, play areas, community planting. The blue arrows show the 2 access points, so one here and one here. The pink arrow shows 1 pedestrian and cycle access point here. And the blue circles here, here and here, they are pedestrian access zones. The parameter plan also includes indicative locations for attenuation basins and road infrastructure, but these will be finalised at reserved matter stage. Off-site improvements include raised cycle priority crossings at Stoneover Lane, Foxbrook and Garraways, new pedestrian crossings on Binkle Lane, 2 crossings at the Binkle Lane roundabout. All matters are reserved except for access, so the key considerations at this stage are the principle of development and access arrangements. So this is the illustrative framework plan. It is only illustrative, so it won't form part of the approved plans. It shows a greater level of detail to above the parameter plan to what the parameter plan shows, and it gives you an idea of what the development may look like. You can see how much of the site will consist of green infrastructure and how the development parcels may be arranged with an indicative road layout. The proposed development density of approximately 36 dwellings per hectare, broadly informed by site constraints and infrastructure requirements. The applicant has committed to delivering a mix of dwelling sizes and tenures, which will be detailed at the reserved matters stage, but it does have policy compliant affordable housing provision, which will be secured through section 106. The proposed public open space buffer to the east will remain free from development to maintain a clear edge to this countryside and to help prevent future coalescence with Swindon. The application site is outside the recognised limited limits of development as defined in the current Wiltshire Core Strategy, with the proposed site directly adjacent to the development boundary of Wootton Basset. The proposal is therefore contrary to the strategy of the current development plan. However, the emerging local plan sets out how this council plans to deliver new housing within rural Wootton Basset going forward. The draft policy 51 allocates the application site for development of approximately 445 dwellings, a local centre, convenience store and land for nursery provision. This policy is not yet adopted and therefore carries limited weight. However, it does reflect the council's strategic direction for the site and is a material consideration in assessing the proposal's ability to deliver a sustainable and well-served neighbourhood. The application has raised objection from local residents. These include such topics as traffic and highway safety, infrastructure pressure, loss of greenfield land, and the impact on the local landscape character, as well as the departure from the adopted development plan. The application has also raised objection from the urban design officer. A key concern was the lack of accessible community infrastructure. Only a nursery is proposed here, no local centre or convenience store, which is what is expected under the emerging policy. As an outline application, and many of these issues can be addressed at the reserved matters stage, significant work has been done to improve the pedestrian and cycle links into the town centre. The applicant has submitted evidence to justify the absence of a convenience store. The retail assessment concludes that the scale of the development does not generate sufficient demand to support a viable store, particularly given the proximity of existing facilities such as the Texaco Express, approximately 350 metres from the southwest corner of the site. This position is supported by the Council's own retail evidence base, including the 2020 retail assessment and the 2025 retail and town sectors position statement, both of which confirm that there is an oversupply of convenience floor space in rural Wootton Basset. Whilst the inclusion of a local centre would have been desirable from a placemaking perspective, officers accept that there is currently insufficient evidence to justify its requirement in planning terms. The illustrative master plan does include a centrally located village green and a nursery, which together could serve as a community focal point and contribute to the overall character and identity of the development. So we're going on now to look at the access arrangements for the site. It should be noted that members probably have received a late representation from the applicants of Mudge Hall, another emerging local plan allocation in rural Wootton Basset. This does question the traffic modelling on the Western Road, as their survey shows higher numbers. This has been discussed with the highways officer and at this stage does not change their position and consider the highways improvements as sufficient to mitigate the development. So the application does seek approval for access only, with all other matters reserved. The vehicle access, as said, is proposed by 2 points. This is the western site access point shown up on the screen, which shows a new 4-arm staggered signalised junction opposite Garraways, allowing all movements and providing a safe crossing environment for pedestrians and cyclists. This arrangement is expected to reduce the use of the southern roundabout and improve emergency access. This slide shows the new junction at the southwest corner of the site, connecting to Binknell Lane. Following design review, the proposed right-hand turn lane at the Stoneover Normarsh mini roundabout has been removed. Instead, an active mode crossing will be provided to the north of the roundabout. This decision reflects a balanced judgment based on the minimal impact on junction capacity, safety considerations, including visibility, stacking capacity, and vehicle speeds, and the need to prioritise pedestrian and cycle safety. Further access improvements include raised cycle priority crossings at Stoneover Lane, Foxbrook and Garraways, which you can see on the bottom of the screen here. A traffic regulation order to amend the speed limit on the western roads south of the A3102, which currently operates under the national speed limit. M4 Junction 6 geometry alterations. The development must maintain the safety and function of Junction 16 and mitigate congestion. National Highways have confirmed that while current impacts can be mitigated through signal timing adjustments, cumulative growth will require further modifications. A proportionate contribution will be secured via Section 106 obligations from this development for the alterations to this junction. Also includes Rural Wootton Basset to Swindon Cycleway. The development will contribute 102,500 via Section 106 towards the delivery of the cycleway. This infrastructure is intended to support commuting demand and reduce pressure on the Junction 16 by encouraging modal shift. The bus strategy, following consultation with the council's bus network manager, a bus route through the site is no longer considered desirable due to the removal of the A3102 roundabout and the introduction of a signalised junction. Instead, improvements will be made to existing bus stops to support public accessibility. A mobility hub will be delivered adjacent to the new signalised junction near Garraways. This hub will include high-quality bus stop infrastructure, high-quality public rail crossing facilities, and will be integrated within the site-wide travel plan. Other improvements include that to the Wilts and Burke Canal, which is located 600 metres from the site. This £12,000 contribution towards access, furniture and surfacing will allow residents with limited mobility easy access to the canal and towpath by improving the surface and the structures. Moving on to biodiversity. So biodiversity net gain became statutory on the 12th of February 2024. this mandated a minimum 10% net gain in biodiversity for new developments. However, as this application was submitted in 2023, prior to legislation coming in, the statutory BNG requirements do not apply. Policy still requires major development to deliver biodiversity enhancements. This application includes on-site grassland enhancement, native and wildlife beneficial species, installation of log piles for invertebrates, and provision for bat and bird boxes. The illustrative ecological parameters plans, as shown on the screen, has been submitted identifying areas for habitat retention, enhancement and protection. This plan aligns with the submitted ecological documentation and provides clarity on site constraints and opportunities for biodiversity enhancement. Great crested newts have been recorded on and near the site. As a European protected species, their presence is a material planning consideration. The applicant has applied for a district level licensing in agreement with Natural England. A signed and countersigned impact assessment and conservation payment certificate is required prior to determination. The council's ecologist maintains an objection until this is received. An agreement has been reached in principle with Natural England and a provisional certificate has been received by the council. This still needs to be signed and countersigned. The objection will be withdrawn upon receipt of this signed and countersigned, and no decision will be issued without this. So, subject to the receipt of the signed and countersigned IACPC and the imposition of appropriate conditions, ecology is not considered a reason for refusal. So, just looking at the site itself, these views have been taken from the LIVA that was submitted with the application. This slide shows the view southeast across the site from a field gate on the northwestern site boundary. This is a single landscape picture that has been split into two to show on the slides. The top part of the pictures shows the northern extent of the site, hedgerows, and you can see the sallypussies in just there. It goes across to the North Wessex Down National Landscape, and then the lower part shows more national landscape, Harris Cross Farm, and the road to the west of the site here. So again, just another view of the site. This is from the footpath WBAS 28, which is within the site looking northeast. So you can see that there is housing on the eastern edge of Royal Wootton Basset. There's a central field here, and the lower part shows hedgerows and the national landscape over this part. So the starting point for decision making is a Wiltshire Core Strategy, which is the adopted local development plan. The site is located outside the defined settlement boundary and in open countryside. Therefore, the proposals are not in accordance with the development plan. Whilst the emerging local plan shows the direction of travel for the council's focus for development, it carries very little weight in policy terms currently. However, the council is unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites due to recent changing in the government's housing need calculation. As a result, the presumption in favour of sustainable development under paragraph 11D of the MPF is engaged. This is a very important material consideration and also known as the tilted balance. In applying the tilted balance, the key test is whether the adverse impacts of granting planning permission would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So, looking at the benefits of the scheme, we have housing delivery of up to 410 homes, which is given very substantial weight. The affordable housing of 164 affordable homes, which is 40% of the overall homes, is given substantial weight. The sustainable location of the site, which is adjacent to the settlement boundary with good access to services and public transport, is given significant weight. The economic benefits, construction jobs, local spending, SIL contributions are given moderate weight. The Section 106 contributions, infrastructure and community benefits is also given moderate weight, as is the green infrastructure, public open space, play area, biodiversity habitat and public right-of-way improvements, and construction employment, which is temporary but beneficial. The retail expenditure and new home bonus, which are minor financial benefits, is given limited weight. So looking at the adverse impacts of the development, there is the obvious conflict with the development plan. The site is unallocated and outside the settlement boundary. This is given moderate weight. The landscape impact, the loss of the open field character and rural gateway to rural Wootton Basset setting is also given moderate weight. There is also limited weight given to the construction disruption and loss of agricultural land and issues such as urban design, infrastructure, and the conflict with the specifics of the emerging local policy plan. This is given limited weight. It is important to note that this is an outline application with all matters reserved except for the access. Detailed design matters will be addressed at the reserved matters stage. This future stage will provide an opportunity to respond to the concerns raised and ensure that this final scheme delivers a well-integrated, accessible, quality development. Significant work has been undertaken to improve the pedestrian and cycle connectivity between the town and the site. These enhancements are expected to benefit both future residents and the wider community, and these will be secured through a combination of Section 106 obligations and Section 278's highways work. In applying the tilted balance, the key test is whether the adverse impacts of granting planning permission would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. In this case, it is concluded that they would not. The benefits of the proposal, particularly in terms of housing delivery and affordability, outweigh the identified harms. Accordingly, it is recommended that outline planning permission be granted subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement and the amended conditions list and the receipt of a signed and countersigned IACPC. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. With that, we go to the members of the committee or local members, if you've got any questions. Councillor Munns.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned fairly early on with regards to the convenience store that the officer, and I forget which area of the team they worked in, they were not satisfied with the lack of a convenience store. You then mentioned that the applicant supplied justification for the absence and some evidence there, which was then accepted by officers. So I'm just trying to seek some clarification there. Was the initial officer's findings overruled, or in light of fresh evidence, did that officer reconsider?
So the objection was from the urban design officer, which highlighted the fact that there is no provision of a local centre. We were then presented with additional information from the applicant, which was corroborated by the information that which we have gained ourselves for the emerging local plan, and it was actually our local plan team that confirmed that they agree with the conclusion of the applicant's retail impact, the retail assessment, to say that actually there isn't this site does not generate sufficient demand, and so we didn't go back to the urban design officer. Obviously, they were looking at it purely from an urban design perspective, and I think there's no doubt that from an urban design perspective, we would want a neighbourhood centre here. However, if there isn't the demand there, there's no point building something that essentially no occupier will take up, and then would either result in an empty shop or a later application coming on down the line to change it to something else.
Thank you.
Councillor Griffin.
Thank you, Chair. You referred quite early in your presentation about two footpaths, WBAS 28, which runs roughly north to south on the west of the plot, looks as if it's going to be significantly retained. But the other WBAS 27, which runs roughly east to west towards the south of the plot, there's quite a significant diversion to that around the southern sort of orange-yellow area shown on the screen here. Is it intended that, so far as possible, restrictions will be made so that the existing hedgerows are retained to protect the existing footpaths, but also the biodiversity that natural and long-established hedges retain?
So again, as we don't have the finalised layout for it, we don't know exactly where that diversion may happen. That will come at the reserve matter stage. There are conditions which will require protection of the retained hedgerows and things like that, but obviously a lot of that will come at the reserve matter stage, and we wouldn't want to do anything to necessarily prevent a really good design coming up, because hedgerows can be moved as long as they are. So we will be making sure that sufficient green infrastructure, if hedgerows do need to be removed and footpaths do need to be diverted, that will come through in the reserve matters application.
Thank you. I'm sure that's an interesting point, because I know on many applications, when you do them at the outline stage, and then when they come forward, we find footpaths are being diverted, hedges are being ripped out, and we'll be told, oh, you should have mentioned this before. Well, I hope since the applicants are here that they're listening to what's being said, and that they're going to pay attention to that when they come up with detailed plans should this be passed today. Councillor Cleasby.
Thank you, Chair. Could you confirm how many of the affordable units would be social rent and what mix is expected?
So it is a policy compliant mix. I'm just wondering. So
Sorry, did I miss it?
So it is a combination of affordable rented and first home. So it's on page 220. So it's 98 units of affordable rented, 41 first homes, and 25 units shared ownership, which has been agreed by the council's housing enabling team.
Sorry, so that's no social housing then?
No.
Oh, because I was sure it said there was a mix, including social housing. Anyway, okay, thank you. One other thing. What guarantees are in place to ensure the open space along the eastern and southern boundary is protected from future development?
So obviously, any application would need to any development would have to come in with a planning application for development on that site. Obviously, we have got the parameter plans which would prevent any development coming forward under the reserve matters application, and that land is considered necessary to stop coalescence to Swindon, provide a visual buffer. So that will be taken into consideration if any application would be, but that land is required for this development, so it would likely to have quite a lot of opposition. However, that said, 100 years time, that
okay, thank you so much.
We'd have to look at that at
Thank
that
you.
point.
Thank you much indeed. Councillor Holder and then Councillor Newbury.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed in your recommendation, you're saying that it should be approved subject to those 3 points there. I'm not sure what the position is of Royal Wootton Basset Town Council, but may I ask, have they been involved in asking what they would want to see as a town council in any Section 106 agreement? Because quite often these matters come forward to town and parish councils at the reserve matters application stage, by which time a number of the conditions in the Section 106 have already been agreed. So is there I appreciate we haven't moved to a recommendation yet, but can you give us any comfort that should this be approved today, that Royal Wootton Basset Town Council have come already with a shopping list of their requirements to be delivered under a Section 106 agreement? Because as somebody who works very closely with my parish council, and I see other members are nodding their heads, there is an element of frustration where the shopping list that our real local councils want, our town councils and our parish councils want, never get discussed appropriately and get delivered as an afterthought rather than as a forethought in outline applications of this nature. So has the town council come forward with their shopping list of what they would want should this approval be given?
I think we will always consult the town councils, and the town council was consulted on this, but it isn't the town council to come forward with a shopping list. We have to make sure that the planning obligations are in accordance with policy and necessary to make sure that the development is acceptable. So the things that the town council may want from the development might not be appropriate to be delivered through this scheme. That might be more appropriate to be delivered through something like SIL and the funds that they get that way. When we're looking at this, we have to make sure the obligations are necessary to mitigate impacts of this development. So it's not for a town council to come forward with a shopping list, as you would suggest.
If I may respond, I think you're underestimating what I'm saying. I completely understand what you're saying about SIL and stuff like that. I'm talking about the ability for our local town and parish council, and in this instance, come forward and say, we disagree with you about the footpath, we disagree with you about the bus stop, we disagree with you about this. If you're going to do this, are you going to supply certain elements of local play areas? Are you going to provide all that infrastructure that is really important? So my subsequent question is, are you able to confirm what dialogue there may have been in a pre-app between the developer, and the developers are here, so what pre-app discussions were held between the developer and the town council before this application was submitted to ensure that any local concerns, whether the application is approved or rejected today, have been taken account of, and we are taking account of the very local issues that our residents expect us as a planning authority and our parish and town councils to work collaboratively with our developers to deliver the best outcome for our residents.
We always encourage developers to speak to the town council, certainly in pre-application discussions, and we try and have a good relationship with town councils. We are doing work to encourage those relationships. That is a development management priority at the moment. There probably is more that can be done there. With this specific application, I don't know what conversations the developer had on this application prior to it being submitted, and personally, I haven't had much sort of contact with the town council on this one, because I was brought into it quite late in the day. This application had been in for a while, so it had a lot of other planning officers dealing with it. So I don't know exactly how much, but we always take into consideration their comments that are received on the planning application.
And like Adrian, I'm fairly new to the authority and obviously new to developments around Wootton Basset. But I know this is the first of at least 3 that are coming forward in the very near future. I see from the comments within the report the Town Council stance, and we may hear more shortly, is largely around the principle of the development rather than real specifics about the planning obligations. But with a view to not wanting to hold up a decision on this one, I hasten to add, because the clock is ticking on this one, but we've got one coming very soon and one coming in the near future too. I'm very happy to engage with the Town Council about their kind of aspirations in terms of planning obligations, and also about the reserve matters process, fully understanding that if things are fixed at the 106 stage, they're fixed for that development, but certainly to have that dialogue with them about other developments, about their priorities and what we can deliver as a local planning authority in accordance with the SIL regs as well. But as Adrian set out as well, that there is that the real local. So that's the important dialogue that we will have, but certainly a real important mechanism that the Town Council will have is that spend of local SIL.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Of course, Nick, we have got a couple of supporters speaking later today, so, or in a moment, should we say. It would be interesting to see whether they say anything about whether they've done anything or whether they're prepared to. And in fact, the other applications that are coming forward, if any of the applicants watch this on YouTube or whatever, perhaps we can start driving something forward earlier in the day rather than all the afterthoughts that we normally get. But Councillor Newbury, no, I'll come to you, Councillor Wayne.
The recommendation on the screen, we have updated conditions list, and I take it that refers to the conditions in Agenda Supplement 3, does it?
I think it is. It's the one that was published yesterday. So
there's nothing new other than the Agenda Supplement 3?
No, that is the condition list that I'm referring to.
Just a couple of questions. The printed recommendation and the one on the screen simply says completion of a Section 106 legal. That presumably refers exactly to what's in paragraph 11.8 of the report, does it? It's not just any old Section 106, it's exactly the 106, so we could say Section 106 agreement as specified in paragraph 11.8.
Yes, that.
And then I have a little twiddly bit here. I looked at the bit about the Section 106 agreement, and I found the total of let me just find it again. It refers to the following total per a Section 106 agreement, and also £410,000 for coach tickets. And I thought, oh, well, that's odd, because that presumably is something that isn't in the Section 106 agreement. And I looked in the report, and I found travel plan on page 213, provision of a travel pack to include 2 6-month bus passes per dwelling, stagecoach mega rider. So these are a particular kind of bus pass to be provided to each house, 2 of them for 6 months, a total of £410,000, apparently not in the Section 106 agreement. And I'm thinking to myself, this is an awful lot of money being put into stagecoach mega rider tickets, and presumably most people buying a house on this development are going to shrug and think, oh, well, don't need to use that because I've got a car. And I'm just thinking to myself, if the 410,000 is not to go into the Section 106 agreement, what's going on with this? I mean, how on earth do you extract it from the developer? And why would you want to extract £410,000 for tickets that very few people are ever going to use? Can you say more about that, please?
So it will be in the Section 106 because it is part of that travel plan, but it will be up to that travel plan to it'll be up to the developer to give that out. Obviously, it won't. I don't think, and this is probably where it would come down to the negotiation of the specific terms of it, that we would ever hold that £410,000. It would be the obligation would be on the developer to provide the bus passes, which is considered to be would consider to cost that amount. So I don't think the amount of 410 will be in the section 106, but the requirement for them to provide those bus passes as part of the travel plan will be required. So it would come down to the specific wordings in the legal agreement on that, but I don't think it would be a figure of 410. I think it will be the requirement to provide those bus passes as part of the travel plan.
Okay, well, on page 221, it says total section 106 contributions, 3,424,000. Other requirements, £410,000 for 2 6-month bus season ticket. So presumably, the developer is being told he has to provide this 410,000, which is in paragraph 11.8. But I'm asking a question. Why on earth would anybody spend that much money on stagecoach mega rider tickets that probably are never going to be used in most cases?
So I think that would come down, as I said, I don't think the figure of 410 will be put in there, but it will be a requirement for them to do it, and that is the 410 is the value that is considered. It will be a requirement as part of the travel plan, which is in the section 106 agreement.
Okay, well, I'm so bemused by this. I think the best thing is I vote against it because I think it's all absurd.
Chair, perhaps we could ask our transport colleague to come in with the rationale behind that aspect of the travel plan.
Hiya, good afternoon. Well, it's sort of a good practice mechanism to try and encourage sustainable transport and get people on the buses. So it's and encourage good habits from the site. So that is what the idea behind the contribution or the tickets are for, is to establish those good behaviours from the off when this site is developed out.
Okay, well, I just think it's terrible precedent, and I'm going to vote against it.
Okay, thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Councillor Newby. Before I go to Councillor White, while we're on the subject of the sort of amendments, can I just question that we're told in Amendment 3 that it's updated, including the removal of condition 22. Is that correct, or do we mean the original condition 23, which is the nursery travel plan, that seems to have disappeared? And also, when we go through, your numbering has gone wrong. You've got construction traffic management as 23, EV charging points 7. So I think that needs to be 24, and then subsequently upgrade all the others. But is it the nursery travel plan?
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, it is. We were working on the conditions quite late. So it's it is the nursery travel plan condition 23 as in the originally printed agenda. So I will update the numbering on the conditions if permission was minded to be approved.
Okay, thank you. Councillor White.
Sorry, I didn't mean to butt in. It was just to echo what Councillor Holder was saying about involving town councils, parish councils, particularly when this lies outside the settlement boundary and contrary to 1, 2, and 19. So perhaps too late now, I don't know. I just wanted to emphasise that point. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, I'm town council related as well with this one. The management of green spaces, it's my favourite hobby horse. Has the management been offered to the town council as an option, as a first refusal? Because in my opinion, all the town councils ought to be looking after the green spaces in their towns.
I believe it could be, yes, but I don't think that conversation has been had yet. But the applicant may advise on that when they're.
I can't remember if we've had service transfer in Basset or not. But
Councillor Griffin.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from the comments about the bus service, might it not be better to consider spending a similar or getting a commitment for a similar amount of £410,000 to providing local bus services to enable these residents of these properties to get in and out of the town centre of Wootton Basset more easily, rather than heading off on a more long distance journey.
I'm not sure if that was considered. I might put it over to the transport officer. I would think that probably 410,000 wouldn't be enough to put on a new service. But
Yes, I discussed it with Phil Grucock, the Highway Network Manager. Yes, we decided against an additional service through the site due to the change in the alignment of the road, because previously there was a roundabout proposed. So that would have provided a more direct link through the site, where he felt the bus service could have been more direct through the site. Instead, we've opted for this solution that would still support the local bus services, but would also encourage good habits and getting people on to the services. So it would still support services into rural Wootton Basset, but it wouldn't just be like the local sort of town rider service I think you were sort of suggesting. So it's not quite as substantial contribution as what was previously suggested, but it is a measure to try and help promote passenger transport and encourage good habits.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking at page 194, which lists the town council's objections as being outside of the settlement boundary and remoteness from the town centre and potential traffic impact. So I think, if possible, that sort of local bus service should be explored as much as we can.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members of the committee, local member? Okay, we go to members of the public. I've got Ms Johnson, who's an objector, Ms Jones, Ms Keating, who are supporters, and we wind up with the local member, Councillor Matthews from rural Wootton Basset East. So, Ms Johnson, if I ask you to have up to 3 minutes.
Yeah, good afternoon. This planning application needs to be stopped for the following reasons. It's in contravention of the National Planning Policy Framework. I cite paragraph 111. Development should be refused on highway grounds if there would be unacceptable impact on highway safety, which there will be. There will be fatalities on Chaddington Lane if this goes ahead. It's in contravention of the Royal Wootton Basset Neighbourhood Plan, Policy 12. Development should not harm highway safety. The transport assessment for this is completely flawed, and I'm going to tell you why. The impact on highways is going to be catastrophic. This is not a walkable neighbourhood. There will be over 1,000 cars at this development. The phenomenon of using your feet to walk or going on a cycle or catching a bus is not new in Wiltshire. They already exist and people don't do it. It's a rural county, people use cars. People will not be on bikes or foot at this development. Why? Because of the following facts. There are no nearby facilities. The local high school is 34 minutes away on foot. That's 2.3 miles. Normarsh Primary School is 1.2 miles away. That's 26 miles on foot, 26 minutes on foot rather. And lastly, the nearest supermarket, Aldi, this is a 32-minute walk away, uphill on a main road, 1.6 miles. And by the way, these distances have all been understated on the transport plan. Secondly, no consideration has been made whatsoever to the lane at the eastern perimeter of this site. This is a lane called Chaddington Lane, which leaves the A3102 opposite Sally Pussy's, and it leads to the historic hamlet of Bynel where we live. This is already a single-track dead-end lane, which is 2.5 mile long. It's already an accident hotspot, and it's used as a cut-through and a rat run off the A3102 when the traffic is busy. You're going to compound this even more by introducing 1,000+ cars to the area. Plus, this area is used for leisure for people who are pushing children in pushchairs, agricultural vehicles who live in the hamlet who have to use it for their business, tractors, trailers, milk tankers, dog walkers, rollerbladers, people on bikes and people on horses from the equestrian facilities. Plus, it is the thoroughfare for us as residents to get into the outside world and must be kept clear for emergency access. There are already droves of people accessing this lane, and the lane cannot cope with any more. There will be a catastrophic accident, and there will be a fatality. I cannot emphasise this enough. Secondly, there is going to be a negative impact on net biodiversity. I'm not satisfied with the response about the great crested newts. It's in contravention with core policy number 50, and there is no plan to mitigate this.
Ms Johnson, you've got about 15 seconds.
Lastly, design. This is in front of an area of natural beauty, the Wessex Downs. This is going to obliterate this view, and it is going to coalesce Royal Wootton Basset with Swindon. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We then move on to supporters. I've got Ms Jones, who's the agent from Carter Jonas.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Jones. I'm a partner in the planning team at Carter Jonas, and we are the agents for this application. The application before you is for up to 410 homes alongside land for a nursery, public open space, landscaping and infrastructure. The site adjoins Royal Wootton Basset and offers a sustainable extension to the town. It's well connected to local services, public transport and employment. The site is identified in the emerging Wiltshire local plan as a strategic housing allocation, and this proposal aligns with the Council's emerging spatial strategy. The application submitted an outline with all matters reserved except access. The parameter plan, which is sought for approval, defines the land uses, the access points, the green infrastructure, and ensures that key community features like open space, play areas, and pedestrian and cycle links are secured at the reserved matter stage. The site has been carefully master planned to respect the landscape and to integrate with the town. And for over more than a 2-year determination period, the applicant has worked very closely with officers to refine the scheme in line with the Emerging Policy 51, which allocates the site, and in line with officer feedback received. At this stage, as you've heard, the majority of officers support this proposal subject to conditions. The only remaining points are ecology, where the objection will be lifted upon receipt of a signed district licensing certificate, which is now in progress. Climate change, where the applicant is committed to industry-leading renewable energy standards, meeting or exceeding the future home standards through its sites. And urban design, where officers confirmed that they are satisfied that strong pedestrian and cycle links will connect this site to existing services, and where there is no evidence whatsoever to justify a new local centre on this site. The development brings with it clear benefits. It addresses Wiltshire's housing land supply shortfall with 410 homes, 40% of which will be affordable. It secures over 3.4 million in Section 106 contributions towards education, healthcare, leisure and transport. It delivers a walkable neighbourhood with active travel infrastructure and biodiversity enhancements, and provides new open spaces and play areas for the community. As you've heard, the applicant is also invested in sustainable transport, which will be secured via Section 106 and Section 278 agreements, which includes, but is not limited to, bus stop upgrades, improvements to local services and cycle parking at bus stops, contributions to the Swindon Wootton Basset Cycleway and M4 Junction 16, and bus season tickets for every new household. David Wilson Homes, as the applicant and the developer here, is committed to the prompt delivery of new homes and to supporting Wiltshire in addressing its housing land supply shortfall by building new homes in sustainable locations. In conclusion, this is a well-considered, policy-aligned proposal that meets local housing needs and delivers significant community benefits. Officers have undertaken a thorough assessment and conclude that the benefits here clearly outweigh any harms identified. I therefore respectfully ask you to support your officer's recommendation and to grant outline planning permission. I'd like to take this opportunity to pass to the applicant to my left to say a few words regarding affordable housing provision. Thank you.
Thank you. Slightly over time, but only a few seconds. So, Ms Keating, the DWH, speaking on behalf of the applicant, you have up to 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Sian Keeling. I'm the Development Director at David Wilson Homes Southern. I just thought I'd take the time today just to answer a couple of the points that have been raised by members. The first one being affordable housing. The scheme is proposing to provide a policy-compliant level of affordable housing. I know there was some question about social housing and affordable housing. It's proposed to be affordable rented product tenure that is very similar to social rented tenure. The only difference is to do with the rental cap. Through the discussions with the housing team, they support the affordable rented tenure over the social renter tenure, just on viability grounds, but it will be rented product, so people essentially on the housing waiting list will be able to occupy those units. So just wanted to clarify that. And in regard to public engagement, just wanted to highlight what level of public engagement we've done over the time frame of the application. Everything actually is documented in the statement of community involvement that we've done over the life of the application prior to it being submitted and whilst it's been submitted. And essentially we've done a number of engagement events with the town and parish councils. We've had a dedicated website where people were able to view the details of the application as well. But we have engaged with local stakeholders prior to the application being submitted, which I know was a question raised by one of the members. If there's anything else that you'd like me to clarify as the developer, I'm happy to do so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And to conclude this part, the local member, Councillor Matthews, who's a member for rural Wootton Basset East. If you could constrain yourself to 5 minutes, I'll be really grateful. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try because I'm losing my voice. I'm here to speak against this application. It proposes the 410 houses east of Royal Wootton Basset. While housing growth is an important part of our long-term planning, it must be strategic, sustainable and community-centred. This application falls short on those principles. This site lies outside the defined settlement boundary for Royal Wootton Basset and directly conflicts with Core Policy 2, which directs growth for sustainable locations. This is speculative development in open countryside, not plan-led and not appropriate. The site is physically disconnected from the town centre. There's no safe continuous footway or cycleway linking future residents to key local services. The nearby Woodshaw development, which sits to the west of this, failed in this respect when that was built 40 years ago, and this site is further to the east. Its location makes it inherently car dependent. While I acknowledge some proposed mitigation, it falls short of making the development sustainable. We should be designing communities where walking, cycling and public transport are viable everyday choices, not developments that default to private car use. This is not consistent with our sustainability goals or responsible spatial planning. This proposal would significantly increase traffic on the A3102 Swindon Road, particularly around the roundabout to the north of the site. And this is also a key corridor for the town and a vital diversionary route when the M4 is closed. It is already congested at peak times. The application offers no meaningful measures to mitigate this impact, nor is there credible evidence that the local road network or M4 Junction 16 can accommodate the additional demand. The site occupies a visually prominent position on the eastern approach to Royal Wootton Basset and currently forms part of the rural buffer separating the town from Swindon, something that residents feel really strongly about. Development here would erode that visual and physical separation, demanding both the landscape and the distinct identity of the town. This is contrary to Core Policy 51, which seeks to conserve and enhance Wiltshire's landscapes. Local services are already under pressure, particularly National Health Service GP provision, which in many residents report is difficult to access. The cumulative impact of major new housing developments cannot be ignored. No firm proposals have been brought forward to expand or support local health infrastructure in line with the scale of the proposal, although I do acknowledge that there is funding within the Section 106 agreement. It doesn't state how this funding will actually increase capacity. The development would harm setting of a Grade 2 listed Lower Woodshaw Farm and a nearby scheduled monument contrary to Core Policy 58, which safeguards Wiltshire's historic environment. In addition, the site is crossed by a high-pressure fuel pipeline, which places clear limits on land use and raises long-term safety concerns. Notably, land near the pipeline is earmarked for essential infrastructure, including a school, casting serious doubts on whether such community facilities can ever be delivered safely on this site. Ultimately, this proposal would not create a community. It would result in a housing estate disconnected from the town, dependent on car travel and lacking local services. There have been 418 letters of objection from members of the public, along with objections from the town council. That should send a very clear message. Communities are built through connection to places, to people and to services. This development offers none of those things. It does not complement the existing town and it does not meet the standard of placemaking that Royal Wootton Basset residents deserve. So just to conclude then, it lies outside the settlement boundary, it forces car use, it adds extra pressure onto the already congested road network, including M4 Junction 16. It's harmful to the landscape and distinct setting of the town. It puts strain on healthcare services, endangers heritage assets and relies on constrained land crossed by a fuel pipeline, and crucially fails to deliver a sense of community. We need housing, we do, but it must be in the right place and come with significant improvement to local infrastructure. I respectfully urge the committee to refuse this application and instead support future growth that is plan-led, truly integrated, sustainable and shaped around the needs of both Royal Wootton Basset and Wiltshire alike. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Before we move on to the debate, Kim, Councillor, I've noticed you left your seat. Could you confirm whether you heard everything that Ms Johnson said that's an objector to the scheme, please? Yeah. If you didn't, I would strongly advise that you shouldn't take part in the vote because there could be a JR if you didn't hear it all. Sorry. Okay, moving on then, I've opened the floor up to members of the committee. Does anybody speak or move anything? Oh, Councillor Newbury.
Chair, I listened to the local member who clearly, understandably, is very unhappy about this very large, unplanned greenfield development, 410 houses. I'm sure if I had one in my division, I would be very unhappy and wanting to oppose it. The difficulty is that the planning officer has not found us any substantial reasons for refusal and has specifically said that there aren't any. We heard from a member of the public that there was highway problems, that it was dangerous in highway terms. Difficulty there is that our own Wiltshire Council Highways Department has raised no objections, subject to a number of highway conditions. And if we as a committee wanted to go down the road of refusing for the reasons that the objector felt so strongly about, we would be in hot water. And I see the planning officer nodding. So the difficulty is that as a planning committee to find reasons for refusal here is incredibly difficult. So I think we're probably going to have to go down the road of permitting this, painful though it is, thanks to the dreadful position with the 5-year housing land supply. The last time I saw a figure, it was 2.0 something. Can anybody give me the latest number?
It's 2.42.
2.42, well, that's a little bit better, but it's still less than half of the 5-year housing land supply that we're required to deliver. So sadly, I think we're going to have to bite the bullet on this. My quibble, and I raised it earlier on, is about this. It just seems to me astonishingly extravagant. The 410,000 is needing to be, per the report in the Section 106 agreement, because the travel plan, it says delivery mechanism, Section 106 agreement. So if we were to go, so I'm thinking, I found myself agreeing with Councillor Andrew Griffin. If the developer is willing to put £410,000 into provision of, money for public transport, there might be a better way that we could use that money rather than buying 410 6-month stagecoach tickets, which I think are unlikely ever to be used. So, Andrew Griffin floated the idea that we could pencil the money in for local provision of local bus services instead. And I'm looking at the developer's agent, manager of, and she is nodding, and the developer's agent is also nodding. So it looks as if there's a willingness for us to use this quite large pool of money for local bus services instead. So I think I would try moving the recommendations subject to referring to the Section 106 legal agreement as in paragraph 11.8, but with the £410,000 earmarked for local bus services rather than stagecoach tickets, and see if there's a seconder. I think Councillor Griffin.
Thank Councillor Newby. I'll just get a response from our transport people.
Yeah, hiya. I see where the point you're coming from, but the advice I was given by the network highway passenger transport network manager was that he didn't want a contribution towards directly towards the services because he couldn't get a service through there with the bus driver and the extra cost. his view that this solution still supported the local bus services, and it did the other things, as I've previously said before. So that was on the basis of advice from the passenger transport manager.
Okay, well, he can always turn down the money if it comes his way, I suppose.
Well, yeah, quite.
Okay, well, you've got a, sorry, madam, you can't speak. Sorry. So we've got a proposal from from Councillor Newbury, but there is no seconder at the moment. Councillor Griffin? That's seconded. Right, so that's on the table for debate. Oh, I must admit, I find it a bit odd because normally I agree with sort of Christopher's views on many things, but I think on this one I don't. But I suppose we're in a position now that if we think the season tickets are a better bet than the service bus, all we can do is vote against the what's on the table and put back what was there originally. It's a bit of a tricky one. But if nobody else wishes to speak, I will go back to Councillor Newbury as a proposer for him to sum
Nothing
up.
to add, Chairman.
Right, Councillor Newbury, officers have just asked, could you clarify the sort of the wording regarding the 410,000, please?
Well, I said 410,000 for provision of local bus services instead of the 410,000 for stagecoach mega rider tickets.
Could we delegate final wording to planning officers?
Well, that's fairly simple. It's not a complicated. I'm hoping that the simple. I try to use simple words.
That's right, and that's the reason for asking, really, because I think I just wanted that clarity before we finalise the wording. So obviously, finalising the wording of a heads of terms is one thing. That's the first stage. Then what it then says in the legal agreement is another. I mean, an idea I had certainly with regard to Councillor Newbury's proposal is whether there's almost like a cascade. Is that's the first option for that contribution, and then a fallback one is the season tickets. But Councillor Newbury, I'm sure, will have a view on that.
I just think it's incredibly extravagant myself. I mean, clearly, if the transport manager were to say, no, we're not going to bother with providing any local bus services, there would then be a negotiation to be had, I think, with the developer about whether the money could be used for something different. But I think we'll try going that way, shall we?
Okay, so you happy with that as you're summing up, Councillor Newbury? Okay, in that case, go straight to the vote on what's on the table. Those in favour, please show. Okay, those against? Abstentions? Oh, can you note, I think if you don't mind, Councillor Cleese, we will note your abstention. Is that all right? Just, thank you. Right, that motion is carried. So thank you very much for your time, and I hate to say it, but hopefully see you here next Tuesday. But right, thank you for your time. Thank you for the members of the public for coming along, and close the meeting.